Okay, we're back on the record. Ms. Terrell, would you like to call your first witness?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to call Mr. Irvine, please.
Mr. Irvine, you are still under oath from this morning.
Yes.
Okay, if you would, please state your name, and if I'm going to ask you to spell your last name because it is being recorded, and this way you'll be correct.
My name is Edward Irvine. The last name is Irvine, I-R-V-I-N-E.
And are you an owner of the property that's under appeal?
Yes, I am.
And did you participate in gathering the documents that I've marked as taxpayer exhibit 1?
Yes, I have.
Okay. And this was your research and your collection that you provided?
That is correct. Yes.
All right. And before I inquire about the property, would you please introduce yourself to this board and let them hear about your background, particularly in agriculture?
Sure. Thank you very much. I was born and raised in Manhattan, Kansas in 1959. My family has been in the state of Kansas since 1880s. So we are lifelong Kansans. I grew up on a farm at Manhattan, Kansas, and we had a diversified farm. We had cattle, we had hogs, we had chickens, we had wheat, corn, soybeans, Milo. It was a very diversified farm. I had 5 siblings and we all worked hard. That's how I learned how to work, was out on the farm. And one of the things that we did when I was growing up was we did sell eggs. As a way to make some extra money. We didn't have a lot of money, and that's how we made some extra money for spending. After I graduated from a little high school, Catholic school there in Manhattan, Kansas, I went on to Kansas State University, where I received a degree in agronomy from Kansas State, which is a study of soils and crops, basically. After college, I had the opportunity to go into farming. I thought, well, you know what, I'm going to give it my shot. But one of the things I did, and this was back in like 1983, was I actually started growing popcorn because I knew that even then, I wanted to be ahead. I wanted to be able to take a product from the farm all the way to the store or to consumers. And so I had up to 20 acres of popcorn. I worked with Safeway Company down in Lawrence, Kansas, where I would take the semi-load of corn down to them. They would bag it up and clean it for me because I didn't have $1 million to go out and buy a whole bunch of equipment. And so they would package it up for me. I'd bring it back to Manhattan, Kansas, where I had storage, and I sold up to 50,000 pounds of popcorn there in Manhattan, Kansas, and in the surrounding areas to private individuals, as well as to grocery stores and to a lot of bars and restaurants. I knew that I had to use my degree in agronomy, and I didn't want to waste too much time. And so I had an opportunity at that point then to go to work for the Soil Conservation Service. The Soil Conservation Service now, of course, is known as the Natural Resources Conservation Service. But when I worked there, it was the FCS. I worked with farmers and ranchers in Waubonsee County, Kansas, to construct and that is plan and construct terraces, waterways, any water retention facilities. I then met my beautiful wife, who we've been together now for almost 35 years, Cindy. I thought it was pretty important at that point to try to stay local. And I knew that we were going to probably have some kids, which we have ended up having 3 together. And so I had an opportunity to work for the state of Kansas. I worked for the State Conservation Commission right here in Topeka, Kansas, for about 5 years, I believe it was. I worked with conservation districts across the state of Kansas, from Cherokee County in the southeast corner of Columbus, clear out to Elkhart County out in Morton County, out in southwest Kansas. And I worked with cost share programs with the state of Kansas. The one that I worked with specifically was the Water Resources Cost Share Program, where farmers would submit their request for these different practices to the Conservation District. And the Conservation District then had a pot of money from this Water Resources Cost Share Program that they would then allocate out for different practices. One of the things that I did when I was at the state of Kansas with the Conservation Commission is I implemented a spot check program, because one of the things that is very important about the spot check program is there were practices that I saw that were coming across my desk, and I wanted to make sure that the money that was being spent from the state standpoint was actually being utilized, on that particular tract of land. And, I did find property on my initial reviews of some of these properties by going out and taking a look at these properties, that the property, the practice that the state of Kansas actually paid for wasn't there when I went out there. And so that was a very important thing that I kind of got started at the State Conservation Commission. My wife and I, we've had several other businesses along the way. And one of them was a soy wax candle business. We had a solar lighting business. I did over 100 different solar lighting systems for the state of Kansas alone. One of our light systems was actually at the National Renewable Energy Lab out in Golden, Colorado. And after a year on the test there at Golden, Colorado, our system was rated as the #1 lighting system in that test. What I found, though, was that a lot of the people that were utilizing some of those solar lighting systems, most of the people that were involved were wanting to have products, solar systems, were from outside the country. And I knew that was not a sustainable situation. So I had an opportunity then to get back with the USDA, which is where I currently work. I'm taking off of work here today, an annual day of leave. I have been working since 2008 for the Specialty Crop Market News. It was known here up until just a couple years ago as the Fruit and Vegetable Market News. What I do with the USDA and the Specialty Crop Market News is I write market reports across the United States. I work with people as far away as California and as far east as Maine and New Hampshire, New York. I write, like, for example, the Apple report on a daily basis in New York. I do the daily report for Wisconsin potatoes and onions. Another report that I work on, which is very important, is the apple juice concentrate report, which I will have to get out tomorrow. That report is a domestic report as well as an international report. I work with people all across the United States in that particular on that report, as well as I work with people in Europe. I work with people in South America. I work with people in China, as well as Turkey, Ukraine. And it's quite remarkable to know that 70% of all the apple juice that's consumed in the United States is coming from outside our borders. 54% of all the apples in the world are grown in China. The United States supplies just 12% of the apples that are grown worldwide. And that's a problem, because as we look at agriculture, it seems like there's a pull and tug. And if we don't support our agricultural enterprises in this state, in this county, and in this country, we're going to be in a very, very bad situation down the road. One of the important things about the USDA, and it's been a very big emphasis the last few years, is the fact that you need to buy local and grow local. You know, when I take a look at the cost to run a load of apples from the San Joaquin Valley in California, which I work with, clear to the East Coast, you know, you're talking, you know, anywhere from $8,000 to $14,000 for one load. Why do we need to do that? Why can't we just buy local? And so that's kind of a little bit of an experience there. Our three sons, our oldest son received, I'm not I guess he's kind of on the other side. There were a house divided. He graduated from KU with 2 degrees, one of them in environmental studies and the other one in molecular biology. And we're very thankful, Cindy and I, to have him on board at our winery because he's our mentor. I rely on him. I learn something new from him every day. And, it's kind of cool when you can say that you can learn something from your kids. Our middle son, he has a degree from Washburn University, and he actually got a degree in computer management. Our youngest son, he had got a degree in interdisciplinary engineering from another good school, Kansas University. Interdisciplinary engineering is a study of mathematics, physics, and computer science. And between our 2 youngest sons, they're the ones that actually take care of our website. They have made our website interactive. We are able to ship some of our wine to 37 different states in the United States. And I don't want to leave out my wife. She's the bread and butter of the business. She, bless her heart, takes care of all of the monthly tax statements that are due to alcohol beverage control. And there's, I believe, 3 of them. And her background is in banking, and she's a real good person to take care of the inventory and also make sure that we're compliant with state statutes on reporting. We also have, the reporting to the federal government, to the TTB, and that's usually an annual report. But any label that comes out of our winery has to be labeled and approved by both the TTB as well as alcohol beverage control.
So would grapes be a specialty crop?
Yes,
Okay. And would you say that you are truly a family farm?
we are truly a family farm. We live on our farm. There's no separation in a lot of ways. I kind of consider it kind of like a dairy because I never get away from it. Okay. When I work full time, at the USDA, I'm going to put in another 8 hours a lot of times at the winery myself. Cindy is in the business full time as well as our oldest son, but the rest of us are just part timers.
Okay. And so is it fair to say then that you understand the business of specialty farms?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And this packet of information contains information about the winery. But if you would just briefly describe your production, growing and production process.
Okay. Well, we're a relatively new winery here in Kansas. We purchased our property there in Leavenworth County, January 13th of 2017. One of the first endeavors that we wanted to do was to get production started as quickly as we possibly can. I'm an old person. I decided I didn't want to wait, a long period of time to get started. So we kind of decided to think outside the box. And so what we did was we started planting blackberries. You can get a crop of blackberries within a couple of years. With grapes, it's going to take a little bit longer. With tomato wine, and which is a very unique one for us, that has brought a lot of people towards us because it is just so unique and so different. We can go from a seed to bottle in 9 months. So with my age of 63 years old, we didn't have to wait a long time. But so we start out, with processing the fruit. And there's different methods to process every fruit. Now, one thing I want to mention about grapes is in the first few years, it's very difficult to grow grapes because you want to make for sure that the grapes have a chance to put a root system down. And so, if you take fruit off the very first year, then you're going to be taken away from the longevity of that grape. Okay. So anyhow, once we bring our fruit in, and like I said, there are different processes on every different fruit, whether it's apples or whether it's pears or whether it's grapes or tomatoes. I'm going to use grapes as an example. First thing we do is we have a grape destemmer. That grape destemmer will go in and it will separate out the stems from the pulp. depending on whether we do a skin on or skin off in our fermentation, then we'll go ahead and the next step, if it's skin off, then we're going to go ahead and we're going to run that white wine through a press. We'll, get the juice out of that of the fruit, and then we will ferment that. Okay. If we're going skin on, like on a Catawba blush wine, then we're going to go ahead and we're going to go straight from that grape destemmer into the fermentation tank, where we will then, of course, Ed Jr. is going to go in and he's going to check the brick content before we go into fermentation. He's going to check the pH, because all those parameters are very important. One of the things that we have in our winery is a laboratory. But thank goodness, I always tell people that you can have a lab. If you don't have a laboratory in your winery, then that's a problem. But you better have somebody that can run the lab, and which is Ed Jr. with his molecular biology degree. From that point, what we do then in the process is we will go ahead and we will let that wine age. Now, one of the decisions that we made at the beginning when we started buying equipment was we wanted to go with stainless steel. There are some people that do utilize plastic, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's just a decision that we made. Okay. Another way that we age our wine is in oak barrels. Now, those oak barrels have become very expensive. You're talking maybe up to $400 per barrel, okay, and which is going to hold roughly 250 bottles, more or less. We are fortunate that we don't have to ship our barrels from California. There's a little place in Southwest Missouri that's called Lebanon, Missouri, and that's where we actually get our barrel. You can't buy a barrel that's going to be on the shelf at the cooperage, simply because you're going to pay for it, and they're going to make it as they need to, because a wine oak barrel is going to actually contract, and it will not hold any wine if you let it sit for a while. Okay. So you have to be able to use it. And if you're going to use it and reuse it, you need to make sure that you keep it filled. And so when you're moving some product out, you have to move some new product back in. After that process, we will go in and we will, we may need to cold stabilize some of our wine. Some of the wine, basically what we will do with cold stabilization is we'll move it into one of our homemade cold rooms, okay? And basically what happens in a cold room is, on a white wine especially, the tartaric acid will form on the inside of the tank. And the reason it does that is because under cold stabilization, the tartaric acid crystals will form on the inside of the tank, inside the cold room, okay? And so it's kind of an interesting process, but we would rather get the tartaric acid out because we don't want to sell it in the bottle. Now, we don't know what, a customer might do with the bottle after they buy it. So we want to do our due diligence and make for sure that we're going to, make it look pristine for the customer. We do all of our own labeling and bottling and corking. We do all of our bottles corking by hand. I have a corking machine. I call it my Ferrari, which is exactly what it is. I wish it really was, but it's not. But that I'm the chief corker. Okay. So
all of this is going on in the building.
This is all going on inside the building.
And describe, if you would, basically the size of what the county has called your tasting room.
The county has called our tasting room commercial.
Mm-hmm.
We don't feel that it is, and there's a lot of different reasons for that. I'm going to use our blackberry wine, for example. Our blackberry wine that we're producing on the farm from start to finish has never left that farm. If somebody comes into our tasting room to taste the blackberry wine, that blackberry wine has never left the farm. And quite honestly, when we put that wine in a bottle, I understand agriculture. That is no different than a bale of hay, quite honestly, because a bale of hay has to be either bound by twine, baling wire, or it's going to be net wrapped. That's a package of hay. A bottle of wine is no different. It's just taking a fruit that's produced on the farm, putting it in a bottle and preserving it. That's the difference.
Okay. So in your winery business, do you file a Schedule F, which is the farm schedule for your income tax return?
Yes, we do.
And do you have a current Kansas license for liquor manufacture and sale?
Yes, we do. That's considered a farm winery license.
Okay, and we've included a copy of that?
Yes,
Mark?
there's a copy in the packet. Yes.
And is Irvine's Just Beyond Paradise LLC a registered agritourism business? And if so, please tell the board what that entails.
One of the first things that we thought was very important to take care of as part of getting a business started, especially a farm winery business in the state of Kansas, was to register with the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks as an agritourism location. And I will tell you that that was in March of 2020. As of July 1st of 2021, the agritourism promotion program was transferred to the Department of Commerce. Okay, and so what agritourism is, and I'm going to read here from chapter 1 of an agritourism handbook. And this is what it says. Now, I will mention one other thing too. This handbook that explains what agritourism is all about was underwritten by a grant from the USDA.
And was it not also in cooperation with the Kansas Department of Agriculture?
That is correct.
Okay.
Here's what agritourism says. Agritourism is the intersection of agriculture and tourism where the public visits a working farm, ranch, winery, agriculture operation, or active heritage site for enjoyment, outdoor recreation, activities, education, shopping, dining, or lodging. Agritourism is at its finest.
Okay. And we have proof also of, within your exhibit, of the certificate for agritourism for you.
That is correct.
Okay. And you also included some photographs in your exhibit. We didn't number the pages, which I'm going to apologize for, but could you just generally turn to the, I'm going to say, probably 20
It
pages
would
in.
be in the exhibit number 1 of the packet, and it's going to be right around page 20, I believe.
I'm going to begin with this page here. That's,
Oh, okay.
okay. So everybody see, it's a copy of the sunset or a rainbow right behind one of your bottles of wine.
Yeah, that's a bottle of honey wine. And I will mention that in that honey wine, we have some of our own wine in that. And that is a picture that was taken right out in front of our building. If we want to go into the other pictures here.
Yes, so there's a picture here that I'm going to skip one here. It's just, it shows the building itself.
Okay.
Okay, let's start there.
That would be the looking to the north from to the north on the property right in front. That's what it looks like on the front of our building. It's a Quonset building. It's 40-foot wide and it's 80-foot long.
And who built it?
Well, you know what? My family and I built that. I mean, we had no idea what we were doing. We went on YouTube to find out how to build a Quonset. We did it ourselves. It was Cindy, myself, all of our 3 sons. I had a couple of my nephews, and it took us 9 days to put up the superstructure. The first 3 days we got done after the 3rd day, and my nephew goes, Uncle Ed, he goes, I don't know if we can do this. I said, I don't want an amphitheater out here. So yeah, we're going to get it figured out.
So we got it done. And then the next picture, is this the event center or tasting room picture?
Yeah, this room is approximately 19-foot wide and approximately 20 to 23 foot in length.
And how many tables do you have set up in there?
We have 3 tables set up. That's it.
So if someone wanted to purchase wine from you, they could go on the website, find when you're open, they could come in and purchase wine in there or taste some.
That's correct.
Okay, so what is the next picture? This looks like your storage room to me.
Okay, the next picture, and I have it labeled in your packet as wine cellar. That is located right below our tasting room, exactly below. When you step onto the tasting room, you're stepping on top of the wine cellar. In that wine cellar, we have both finished product in bottles, as well as we have our barrels down there too, our
I can
oak
see the
barrels.
barrels and the cardboard boxes have bottles of wine. correct?
All the cardboard boxes have a finished product on it that we had bottled right there on site.
Okay, and then the next picture is the tomatoes that you make tomato wine out of?
That is correct. Yes.
And then popcorn still?
Yes, popcorn, one of the nice things, of course, I started growing popcorn in 1982, so I do have a little bit of experience with that, I would say. And we like to offer for free popcorn to any customers that come into our tasting room.
Okay, and then we have a picture following that is a picture of some of the grapevines. Am I correct? Right?
And yeah, that's
And
correct.
then more popcorn.
Yes.
And these are the next picture of the stainless steel.
These are, okay, the first picture there is some of our stainless steel tanks that we have in our fermentation room, in our aging room, and that's looking south towards the tasting room.
Okay.
And the next picture is just going to be looking the opposite direction, looking towards the north inside the building.
And then you've included a picture of your laboratory.
That, yep. And I tell you what, I keep out of that as much as I can. I let Ed Jr. take care of any of those calculations.
And then the final picture, what is that?
Okay, the final picture is a storage area that we have on the north side of the fermentation room. And obviously, I mean, it is exactly what it is. It's storage for our winery. There's 2 presses in there. There's a milk tank in there that we have retrofitted as a wine tank, stainless steel, of course. And then there's some storage for some unused bottles.
Okay, so not to disclose too much of my immoral upbringing, I have some experience with being in a liquor store. Any of these things that we just looked at, am I going to find in my liquor store downtown?
Absolutely not.
Okay, so when the county appraiser said, well, if they can do this downtown, that would be commercial. So let me just kind of run through this. There's no production of wine at any liquor store that we know of, correct?
Absolutely not.
And they might offer free popcorn, but I've not found that one.
I've not found that one either, because we do tastings at legal tasting on special events at liquor stores. And I've never seen any. No.
And to the best of my knowledge, the liquor store that I go to doesn't allow me to taste anything. They make me cash and carry out the door.
That's exactly true. You know, a lot of the liquor stores that we are in, you know, they really like us to come to legally do tasting for them. And it's actually really nice for us too, because we get to see customers, but they also get a chance to taste the wine. I mean, most wine that you see in a liquor store, you have no idea what it tastes like until you get home, unless you've had it before.
Right. And most of the wine in the liquor store is not Kansas wine.
Most, I would say probably about 95% is not Kansas. There are some of the liquor stores that we're in are starting to put put together a local section. And I know that not only myself, but my good neighbor, Brian and Gina, have wine in liquor stores, as well as some of our other fellow wineries. And that's very important because it's like what I was talking about with the USDA, buy local, grow local. I mean, it's so important for the local environment. I always heard that, any dollar that is passed through a farm community, it's going to be turned over 7 times. So it's very important that, and we have a lot of our customers that want to support local, and that's what it's about.
Okay. The next, in my exhibit, the next section is just a transcript that we provided of the small claims. But following that, if you draw your attention to the letter from the Kansas Department of Agriculture, has the Kansas Department of Agriculture weighed in on whether the growing of grapes and production of wine is an agricultural activity?
Absolutely, they have.
And their response is that it is?
Yes, and if you don't mind, I could read
Yes.
a real quick response here. This letter was dated September 8th, and it's from the Kansas Department of Agriculture Marketing Department, and it says that the Kansas Department of Agriculture is committed to support of farmers, ranchers, and agribusiness across the entire Kansas agricultural sector. Thank you for contacting our agency for clarification regarding whether growing grapes and making them into wine is an agricultural activity. We believe that this activity does constitute an agricultural activity under Kansas law for several reasons. I'll stop there.
And this letter was from the Director of Agricultural Marketing from the department.
Kansas Department of Agriculture. Yes, correct.
And did your research also get you into examining whether there were federal laws on the question of whether growing grapes and producing wine is an agricultural?
Yes.
And the answer is what?
Yeah.
That the federal government agrees that the growing and production of wine is agricultural.
That's correct. And if you don't mind, I can quote here from US Code 1626, which is also in the packet, I believe.
Yes.
And it says, when used in this chapter, the term agricultural products include agricultural, horticultural, vinicultural, and dairy products, livestock, poultry, bees, forest products, fish, shellfish, and any other thereof, including processed and manufactured products, and any and all products raised and produced on farms, and any processed or manufactured product thereof.
So for the federal government and 7 US Code 1626, they're saying not only is viticulture, which would be wine, right?
Correct.
Not only is that agricultural, but selling that and related products is agricultural.
That is correct.
Okay. And you've included in here that exact section. Did you also research Kansas law?
Yes, I did.
And did you include a copy of KSA 41-102 and 41-355 in your exhibit?
Yes, I did.
And are those the statutes that relate to agritourism?
Those are the, what was that again?
The 41, let's take 41, I'm sorry, 44-102. Got my pages mixed up here. Is the definition of, well, it contains the definition statutes for alcohol, am I correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And then 41-355 specifically relates to producers' licenses for farm wineries.
That's correct.
All right. And did you also attempt to learn anything from, or did your research show you anything from the Property Valuation Division, which we call PVD here, or of the Kansas Department of Revenue about farm wineries?
Well, I contacted Bob Kent, who is Assistant Director of the PVD, and we had quite a long conversation on a number of occasions. And so I was really trying to find out from Property Valuation Department here at Department of Revenue what their take on farm wineries really was. And I was provided some information but it didn't allude to any identification of a farm winery. And if you don't mind, I can read a real quick email that's also in your packet. And basically, this is what it says. And this is word for word. I asked Bob, I said, Bob, thank you very much for KSA 791439. I appreciate. Do you have any rules and regulations that PBD uses to administer the law and how the state further determines commercial and agricultural structures? Thank you very much in advance. Mr. Kent's response to me, and it is in your packet, it says, we follow the statute, but here's a table from one of my course manuals. This is all I have available.
And the board will know this, the chart that he provides is just a chart that says ag land is 30%, ag buildings are 25%. I mean, there's no instruction. You could get this from, I mean, this is a regurgitation of 1439.
And this is what he said he uses to train appraisers across the state.
And he has nothing else.
He gave me nothing else. No.
And did you have also communication with Mr. Titus, the chief counsel for the Kansas Department of Agriculture?
Yes, I did.
And what was the gist of the correspondence from Mr. Titus, the chief counsel?
Mr. Titus, at the time,
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The email that's included reference Bernard Irvine. Could you just explain, is that your brother?
Bernard Irvine is an attorney, an ag attorney in Manhattan, Kansas. And yes, he is my brother.
Okay. And he copied you on this information.
That is correct. That is correct.
And all right, I'll let you continue then. What was the position then of Mr. Titus as to whether or not this were agricultural activities?
This is what Mr. Titus said, and he addressed this email to Mr. David Van Pars, who is the counselor for the county commission in Leavenworth County, as well as my brother, Mr. Irvine, Mr. Bernard Irvine. And this is what he said. He said, it is a position of KDA, that is Kansas Department of Agriculture, that a licensed farm winery or anyone engaging in viticulture or production of grapes and wine in Kansas is conducting an agricultural activity to the extent that an entity may host and conduct activities intended to showcase or otherwise related to their agricultural activities. They are also considered agricultural activities.
So from the Department of Agriculture, the growing, the production, and the sale of not only the wine, but related things are all agricultural activities.
That is correct, including agritourism activities.
Okay. So so the Department of Agriculture is saying, yes, they can host
That's correct.
and conduct activities to showcase your wine
That's correct.
and still be agricultural.
That's correct. That was my understanding.
So the Department of Agriculture's position on whether there's a competitor in town is not there, right?
That's correct.
They don't have the same position
No,
your county appraiser does.
no.
Okay. So did you also research local zoning rules?
Yes, I did.
And did you learn anything about how the court system in Kansas treats agricultural properties in terms of zoning?
Well, I didn't want to go too far out on that. And so I just went to the articles of the zoning and planning right in Leavenworth County. And I wanted to see what they had to say. And in Article 3, which is also in the packet, this is specifically what it says in Leavenworth County. It says agricultural purposes. The use of a tract of land, 40 acres or greater, where the principal activity is to produce income from the growing of crops, horticulture, nursery, truck farm, or the raising of fish, poultry, or cattle, or other livestock, including commercial feedlots. Such definition includes the structures necessary for carrying on farming operations, the retail sale of items produced as part of the farming operation is permitted. including the operation of a commercial greenhouse or hydroponic farming. That's what it says in the county zoning regulations on
Okay.
what agriculture is.
Which would also seem to be contrary to the position taken by the county appraiser with respect to what is agricultural activity.
It seems like it's just the opposite.
And in your work for the USDA, are you aware of any USDA publications concerning direct farm sales of food?
Yes, I am.
And I think we included a sample in the packet. Am I correct that in 2020, the direct to consumer sales accounted for 33% of the $9 billion of local edible food commodities produced by farmers?
That is correct. Based on the publication, and this was from NAS of the USDA.
So while the county says, well, maybe they occasionally sell eggs, the fact of life is a third of the $9 billion of local edible food is produced and sold on direct farm sales.
That's correct. Can I just kind of read what it says there real
Yes.
quick? I think it's very important. It says direct farm sales included both fresh foods and processed or value-added products such as milk, cheese, meat, wine, and jams.
And so we've included a copy of a sample USDA document in your,
That's correct.
all right. And after learning that your on-farm winery was considered commercial rather than agriculture, did you research other similar properties in Leavenworth County?
Yes, I did.
And you filed what we call an equalization appeal to this board, correct?
That's correct.
And you satisfied yourself that our Constitution requires the properties to be treated uniformly and equally, correct?
That's what Article 11 of the state constitution says, that all properties will be, equal and uniform,
Okay,
not only in Leavenworth County, but across the state of Kansas.
so you took it upon yourself
Yes.
to go find similar properties and learn how they're,
And you know what? That took a lot of time. But I'm telling you what, I went to the county appraiser's office. I went to Facebook pages. I went to websites. I went to from the Land of Kansas program that is administered by the Kansas Department of Agriculture. I went to the agritourism program that's administered now by the Kansas Department of Commerce to pull this information together wherever I could.
okay. So the first property that you've included in your packet is the Smith Trust. Tell me about the Smith Trust.
The Smith Trust is located in Leavenworth County on Tonganoxie Road. That is owned by one of the county commissioners, Doug Smith, and his wife, Kay. They have a residence there, and they also have 3 buildings that are all listed as agriculture.
Okay, and did you go on Facebook to determine whether or not they had any retail sales at their farm?
They're absolutely having retail sales at their farm. And not only that, but they're also advertising on their Facebook page as we will only accept cash.
Okay, so we have pictures from their Facebook page that says the barn is full, time for Black Friday and Saturday sale, correct?
That's correct.
And then they had a Christmas sale.
That's correct.
So Black Friday would be after Thanksgiving, Christmas then follows. And according to their website, they repurpose, repaint, and recycle, and then sell it, correctly?
That's what it says on their Facebook page. Yes.
And they've had this barn sale that she has listed was on December 8th. But it was going to be Friday, Saturday, and everything on Saturday is 20% off cash only, correct?
That's what it says.
Was that barn or that land under that barn assessed as commercial by the county appraiser's office?
No, it's not. Everything is assessed as agricultural.
Now, I'm assuming that the commissioner must be in agreement with you that he's entitled to have sales out of his barn and still be agricultural.
I want to be just like Commissioner Smith.
Okay. The next one you have is J&N. And J&N Ranch is owned by Joe and Norma Hoagland, and Mr. Hoagland is a former legislator from the area, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And were you able to learn if Mr. Hoagland has on-farm sales?
Well, Mr. Hoagland and the J&N Ranch, they are not an agritourism location. They're not from the land of Kansas company, but I understand, livestock. I grew up with them. I know what straw sales, what semen sales are in straws. I understand what production sales are. And I mean, everything is just right out there on their website. I mean, they even list how many dollars that they have on each different sale. And one of them, if I recall right, says $532,000 in one day. I would love to sell that much wine in one day.
So they, and all of that is included, pictures of the
Pictures,
sale.
yes.
Pictures of the total amount of their.
Of each
dollars.
sale, yeah,
And they have the sale like twice a year.
twice a year. But they have semen sales and I know from being in around cattle that even though you have a sale, a production sale, that does not preclude that farm from having sales any day of the week. If they have other animals for sale, they can be sold at any time, and that doesn't have to be at the production sale.
And as a matter of fact, their website, and which is included in your exhibit, says they have production sales, semen sales, hunting leases, and timber sales on there.
That's correct. That's what the website says.
And Mr. Hoagland actually says this is the birthplace of Black Hereford cattle.
Yeah, and I mean, there's kind of especially Hereford cattle. Most Hereford cattle are going to be, they were imported originally from England, Europe, Scotland, where they were actually, brown and white. Now they have created a new breed, which is kind of cool in itself. But I mean, and they're focusing on that.
My understanding at my farm was Hereford. My
Okay,
understanding is this is a combination of Black Angus and Hereford to make a Black Hereford.
exactly. And just like my family in Manhattan, they have Sim Angus, which is a combination of Simmental and Angus.
Okay. And they, it also says on their website that they offer bow and rifle hunting leases on various properties. Trophy white-tailed deer, turkey, prairie chicken, quail, waterfowl are featured on our Missouri River bottom ground and Flint Hills, and guided hunts and bass fishing tours are available.
That's correct. That's what it says on the website.
Okay. And then you've got a picture of the timber sales where they're starting to do the forestry program. And based off your research, is any part of their farm not agriculture?
No, I mean, I feel that their entire farm is agriculture, and I want to be just like J&N.
The county agreed. County said
Yeah.
it doesn't matter that they have multiple sales and sell leases and hunting and timber and
Right.
doesn't matter. Okay. The next one is the, if I understand this right, is this the alpaca property, Manna Meadows?
Yes.
Okay, so when you were doing your research about Manna Meadows, they
Well,
alpaca?
Manna Meadow alpaca is definitely an agricultural enterprise. They are, showcasing their alpacas. They are selling wool and products that they have from their alpacas on the farm. They have tours. They have, people coming out. I think it says by appointment. They are taking their alpacas on the road for people if they so desire. What's kind of funny about that particular alpaca, Manna alpaca property is the fact that in my research on the 20th of September, every building on that property was listed as agriculture. I went back and looked at that property again on October 23rd, which is a Sunday. I work year round all the time. I went back and looked, and it had been changed on one of the buildings to commercial. I went in and I called and I talked to them. That is Sharon and Brian of the alpaca farm on the 27th of October. And I asked him, I said, did you know that one of your buildings is now listed as commercial? And she goes, Oh my gosh. You go, no, nobody said anything to us at all. It just there.
You feel like that this happened as a result of the winery appeals?
That very well could be because that was one of the cases that are one of the farms that we submitted. And I was really kind of aghast that that could happen.
And you have pictures in your exhibit that show the blankets, the gift cards, the headwear, the neckwear, the mittens, and the toys and games that these people sell.
That's
that
correct.
They make.
They're selling them online as well as at their store, at their place.
The next one, a lot of Manna Meadows. What does the Clam, KLAMM farm grow? And
They sell flowers, cut flowers. People can come out and pick flowers at their location.
Okay, and did you?
They're an agritourism location as well.
Okay, so they're in agritourism, and did the county pick up their property as commercial or agricultural?
It is listed on the county appraisal card as agricultural, 100%.
And do they also offer on-farm events like classes and?
Yes, they do, having to do with their flowers.
Okay, tell me about the Brewer Farm.
Okay. There's two different brewer farms. There's one that is specifically owned by Dennis, and that is on Loring Road in Leavenworth County. And then there is another one owned by Andrew, which is on 246th Street, also in Leavenworth County. But specifically, I'm going to focus here briefly here on Dennis Brewer property. He has a sign on their property. It's a permanent sign, and it says hay for sale. And I know a little bit about that hay.
Tell me about the hay.
Well, first of all, hay is really no different than wine in the agricultural sense, because you're either going to wrap it up in twine or baling wire, or you're going to wrap it up in netting. What's funny about that, though, is the fact that Mr. Brewer actually baled hay on our property as well. We did it on shares, but he takes his share and he moves it over to his farm. And so
Mr. Brewer is not just selling his hay. He's selling hay that he has farmed on other people's property.
that's correct.
Moved over, and he sell hay year round?
The sign is up 365 days out of the year.
I noticed it was up in your photo, but it was also apparently a campaign sign.
There was a campaign sign as well, yeah.
All right, so that's the hay farm. So
But they also have a excavation business as well. That's on that same farm, or that farm is utilized as well as the other Brewer farm. And, I know that they're doing work because they were on a certified list of doing certified list of people that did septic systems in Leavenworth County. But they also hauled asphalt screenings for my driveway. And so, I mean, I know that they're doing multiple things there, but the predominant use appears to be agriculture, because that's what they're listed at, is agriculture.
So even though there's an excavation equipment, and even though they're selling other people's hay that are
Right.
hay from other farms, the county still has them as agricultural.
Yes.
Okay, so what is the Manus farm, and what do they sell?
Let's see here. I'm going to have to get back to my notes on that one. I believe,
I think it's a Smiling M.
okay,
farm,
Smiling M.
And I think they list, they raise quality natural food in a sustainable way, non-GMO
Yeah.
eggs, whole
Right.
non-GMO chickens, retail cut sides of beef.
Yeah, and this is right on their farm, and that is located at Let's see, I get an address for you here.
I think your exhibit.
I have, yeah,
Careful.
19549 Parallel Road, Tonganoxie, Kansas.
Okay. And they're from the Land of Kansas program as well.
Yeah, and that's where I was able to obtain, some of the information on them was from the Land of Kansas program. Yes.
And then we have the Devon Farm, also known as the Oregon Trail Farm. Are they a registered agritourism
They're
farm?
a registered agritourism. They're selling honey, they're selling blackberries, they're selling blackberry, blueberries. And they also have eggs as well.
And are they classified as agricultural by the county?
No, excuse me. Yes, they're classified. They're classified as agriculture. There's no commercial on it. And yes.
How about the 2L Farm, which
That is a farm to table. Again, they are not only doing farm to table, but they're also offering sides of beef and different cuts of beef available there, either online or at the farm.
and do they advertise farm to table events on their farm?
Yes, they do.
And are they classified as agricultural by?
They're, classified totally as agricultural.
And they list on there that they'll sell you anything from shepherd's pie to short ribs to sides of beef, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And I think they even have a cookbook if anyone's interested. I'm not going to try to say the next name of this farm, Meusch.
Metzke,
Metzke? Okay, good.
we'll be close with that.
And what do they do?
Shane Metzke and his family, they have a pumpkin farm, a corn maze, and that's primarily what they're doing.
And they're a registered agritourism.
They're registered agritourism.
Okay. And are they classified as agricultural?
They're classified as agriculture, yes.
And how about the John's Farm? Are they open to pick sunflowers as well as do photo shoots?
Yes, they are.
And they're agricultural.
100%.
And did you include in your exhibit number of other examples of businesses on rural land in Leavenworth County that were treated differently than your farm?
Yes, I did.
And did you also find examples of the county valuing, examples of similar properties across the state of Kansas, not just in Leavenworth County?
One of the things that I wanted to try to find out was, I know that in Article 11 of the state constitution, where it talks about there's going to be equal and uniform taxation across the state of Kansas. I was really surprised to find out that there's an awful lot. And I went and looked at, including Leavenworth County, 22 counties across the state of Kansas. That was a tremendous amount of work to do that. But I thought it was necessary because one of the things that I found is it doesn't matter if it's milk at Hildebrands in Gary County, where I'm going to use that as an example, where they're producing the milk right on the farm. They're bottling the milk right on the farm. They have a gift shop right on the farm, and they are 100% listed as agriculture. And that is just an example of, another property. I will also mention the fact that in some of the other properties that I have looked at across the state, specifically in our neighboring counties, of people that are doing the same thing that we are. When I'm talking about farm wineries, when we go to Wyandotte County, which is borders Leavenworth County, I find Row Ridge Winery. They are listed 100% agricultural. When I go to Johnson County, I find KC Wine and I find Bergmont, and they are working towards, and they're going to be 100% agricultural.
They have been treated differently, but according to
The county is making amends and making sure that it's done right. When we go to Douglas County and we look at additional wineries in Douglas County, we find Whitetail Run, 100% agricultural. We find Trivedi, out west of Lawrence, 100% agricultural. We find Davenport, 100% agricultural.
One of those wineries in Douglas County that is 100% agricultural is owned by Senator Tom Holland, the ranking minority member on the Senate Tax Committee.
That's correct. And you know, the real interesting part about that is that Tom and his wife live on the property just like we do. They're using part of the residence for their wine business like we are. But somehow or another, I want to be just like Tom.
Okay, so did you also research Kansas Attorney General opinions about, are there any opinions about on-farm wineries or agricultural?
There certainly are. And one of the original Attorney General opinions that was written in 1992 by Mr. Bob Steffen. And I got to tell you a real funny story about Mr. Bob Steffen, and I haven't told anybody about this except for maybe my wife. Bob Steffen and I actually met each other in the grocery store in Dillon's. And unfortunately, one of my kids fell out of the grocery cart. And Bob was right there, and he came right over and he said, "Are they okay?" And you know, I knew who he was, and so I was kind of taken aback by him. But and also on this Attorney General opinion, I also know Mr. Don Rezak, who was a representative at the time. Mr.
Rezak was a representative who requested the.
He was the one who requested the original Attorney General opinion 92. I went to school with Don Rezak's son, Lance. We both graduated in agronomy in 1983 from Kansas State. And so I knew the family quite well. But anyhow, you know, I'm going to read to you, if you don't mind, real quick, what it says in that opinion. Okay, this is KSA, it says KSA 1991 supplement 74-552. It says farm wineries are in the business of the manufacture of domestic table wine, which may or may not include the actual growing of grapes. Regardless of this fact, the manufacture of domestic table wine seems to fit within the general definition of agriculture purpose because it is a science and an art and production of supplying human wants and raising products. And his conclusion at the very end, it said, using the same rationale, because part of this opinion was about wildlife refuge. But he said, using the same rationale, we can conclude that a farm winery is an agricultural pursuit and is therefore exempt from county zoning regulations.
Okay. And I've asked you about agritourism, and you talked a little bit about it, but it's a more recent act.
Yes, 2004, I believe.
It was passed by the legislature, and maybe as a result, the implementation as a result of a USDA grant, correct?
I probably wouldn't say that as a result of a USDA grant. The handbook itself was a result of a USDA grant.
And so there is a manual on agritourism.
That is correct. It's a 140-page document, if I'm not mistaken.
We've included parts of it in your exhibit, and the entire thing is in
Brian and Gina's, yes.
Yes. So I want to focus on chapter 7. The chapter 7 is just about on-farm wineries, correct?
That's correct.
And it not only describes them, but it also tells you how to market the wine, does it not?
It absolutely does.
And does it say that the marketing could include tastings,
Yes,
special events such as
Yes.
murder mystery dinners, et cetera,
yes,
public tours,
yes,
harvest parties,
yes,
art shows,
yes,
wine and cheese pairing events,
yes,
cooking classes,
yes,
photo shoots,
yes,
wedding and engagement parties,
yes,
and having a store that includes in this book, wines from your property, wine accessories such as stemware, corkscrews, gift items, wine-related home decor, local cheeses, gourmet foods, appetizers, and my favorite chocolate.
yes,
So this is all what the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Commerce in conjunction with the USDA is telling people, this is how you market your wine.
Agriculture has changed an awful lot over the years. When I was growing up, it was, in Kansas, it was, corn and soybeans and cattle. As we have moved forward, and I see this with my job at the USDA, it has become very important for people to be able to expand upon what agriculture really means. My sister worked for the Kansas Farm Bureau for 42 years, and she said, I lost a niece, here a week ago. We were sitting around a table after the funeral, and she said, specialty crops and agriculture has changed so much over the years. She says it's nothing like what it used to be.
And isn't it marketed as a way to save the family farm?
It's a way to save the family farm. And the problem that we have in this state, and it's not a problem, we can make it an advantage if we want. We don't have mountains. We don't have oceans here. We have to do something to keep our farms viable. If it is adding tourism at our winery, just in the last couple of months, we've had people there from Hanoi, Vietnam. We've had people from Brazil. We've had people from Venezuela. We've had people from Mexico. We've had people from all across the United States. And a lot of them find us because of Google Maps.
But in the manual itself, it says that these are ideas. So hopefully you can remain on the farm without having to get a second job to supplement farm income.
You know what? I understand what it's like to have a second job. But our goal is to keep it in our farm. We want to pass it on to our next generation. That's one of the reasons why Cindy and I started this winery to begin with, because we want to leave a legacy for our kids. To get this started for them has been difficult. I mean, it has been very, very difficult. And I mean, we've hit roadblock after roadblock after roadblock, and we don't need any more roadblocks. We want to stay out there on that farm. We want to produce the best wine that we can for our customers.
But is it your testimony that you're doing everything that the manual says you can do to market your wine?
There's nothing that we're doing that's not in that manual. And I might mention also, we have had 5 weddings out at our winery. I'm very proud to say that we have not charged any of those people a dime to have their wedding at our place. Only thing that we're concerned about is selling our wine.
Right. So when there's a wedding at a winery, agritourism, the place may be offered for free, but they're expected to, or they must purchase the wine, which is how you market the wine.
Part of our license at for the alcohol beverage controls, and we're not set up to sell outside alcohol. We adhere to that. We have a sign in our driveway that says no outside alcohol allowed. And we adhere to that. And if we find anybody that is going to break that rule, they're not going to be able to stay there.
So knowing all of this, and I appreciate you taking the time to educate me and perhaps even the board, are you asking the board to classify and value all of your land and buildings as land devoted to an agricultural purpose?
Yes, we are.
That is all I have from Mr. Irvine.
All right, thank you. Mr. Mars, cross-examination.
Or a quick follow-up on that last question.
Sure.
Say all of your land. Do you not live on the property? Is not a portion of that land?
We live on the property, and that is our residence. Yeah.
Okay. So there is a residential component.
We do have a residential component. Yes, we do.
And it's part of that.
The same Quonset.
Quonset.
Yes, that is correct. Yes.
So it's not your request that the residential portion be changed to agriculture.
I'm realistic, and I know that's correct. Yeah, we're on the same page.
Okay.
Yes.
Just I was sure that's what you meant. It's just not how it came out. So.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you clarifying that and making sure we're on the same page with that.
I a few of these things, as far as some of these other properties, like the Brewer property with the hay sales. He's selling hay that he's baled from your property.
And others.
People's property.
Yes.
Is it your testimony that the county appraiser's office is aware of this fact that he's bringing in hay from other farms? And
I don't know. I can't speak for the appraiser. I have no idea whether they know about that or not.
Okay, they know now, based on your testimony, but they may not have known before.
This has been in the packet for 20 days and there was supposed to be a 10-day rebuttal period and I never heard anything.
Okay. The alpaca store is kind of the same question. Do you know whether prior for the 2022 and prior years, if the county appraiser was aware of an alpaca store, that existed, if they had knowledge of that and just disregarded it? I mean, is that, do you just don't?
I can't be here to make assumptions on what the county appraiser did or did not know. That would be out of my realm to be able to answer that question.
Okay. And with the Smith Trust property where the barn sales are held, you don't have knowledge that would conflict testimony of Mr. Weber about the other uses that building is used for throughout the year, as far as storage of agricultural trailers and whatnot?
If we want to talk about predominant use, and if they're actually labeling that property as agriculture, then I have no idea why we shouldn't be labeled as agriculture, because what I see on Facebook with all of this repurposed stuff being sold, it's not a garage sale, okay? I talked to the Department of Revenue. They do not consider that a garage sale. When you go out to a garage sale and you buy items and then you resell them, that's more like an eBay to me.
Okay.
And that's what the Department of Revenue, Department of Taxation explained to me as well,
Okay.
especially for cash.
Do you know how many days a year the property is used for these?
I can't say for sure. I can tell you what it says on the Facebook page, and it's
From time to time.
from time to time. What they do in the interim period of time, I have no idea.
Okay. And you've given a lot of testimony regarding laws, cases, AG opinions talking about zoning and the agricultural zoning of farm wineries.
I might want to follow up on that real quick if you don't mind.
Well, let's try. You understand the issue here is not, while that may influence characterization of property for taxation, it's zoning and taxation are two different realms of the.
And I understand that. And I mentioned that Attorney General opinion at the very end there that talked a little bit about that, but the real issue there and what I'm trying to get across on that Attorney General 9292 is the fact that they are admitting in that Attorney General opinion that what we're doing is agriculture, okay? Planning and zoning, that is a different department than appraisal. But it seems like in Leavenworth County, they want to somehow or another tie those two issues together. And I don't think that's right either. But if you go take a look at what they're doing in the county, it seems like that might be one of the things that they're trying to do. Just an analysis.
As far as your research around the state into other wineries, did you find other wineries that had commercial classification in your research?
Yes, I did. But why would I want to include those in my information? Certainly, there's more than enough to show that there is a problem in the state. And the problem is when you take a look at article number 11, it says that there can be equal and uniform taxation across the state. I think the state and the counties have a problem here.
Okay, so it's not that just Leavenworth County is the only one listing any wineries.
Oh, I think this is a statewide issue. Leavenworth County is one of the 22 that I actually went and looked at. Okay.
All right. On your property, this tasting room sits above the fermentation room, was it?
It sits above our storage area where we keep our barrels and our finished bottled product. Yes.
Okay. That tasting room, is there any use made of that specific area of that building? It's very nice, by the way. I mean, it looks like a nice space.
Yeah, well, for a Quonset,
Right, exactly.
you're welcome to come there anytime.
I might. But is that specific space that's designated your tasting room, is it used for other things other than tasting wine, selling wine? Is there other
We're
production of wine done there?
we're storing wine that is finished product, just like we have in the basement there in that same tasting room.
Okay, no other processing of the wine. You don't move the tables out of the way and use it for some other purpose during the year.
Well, I tell you, if you go out and look at the roof or the ceiling in our fermentation room, you might know why we probably want to keep the processing, most of it,
Sure.
I mean, but we use it. It's part of the same building. I mean, there's nothing that says that we can't use it for any part of the production if we need to.
Okay. But that's not been your use of it.
That's not the total use for that. No.
So as far as that tasting room, using that section of the building, how many days of the week, days of the year is that open, available? for people to
Our
come?
tasting room is open Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday from 12 to 8. We're open on Saturday from 10 to 8, and on Sunday we're open from 12 to 6.
Okay.
We're not open on Monday or Tuesday.
All right. And do you hold any events there in the tasting room, like with the wedding? Do you rent out the tasting room for anything as far as?
We haven't charged anybody a penny for any rent
Okay.
on that.
And so you mentioned these wedding parties. You make the space available, but you don't charge for that.
That's correct.
So that goes for your pavilion, tasting room, any part of the property.
We don't charge for people coming out and wanting to taste wine or to have an event at our place.
Okay. The wine that you sell, is that all that wine's produced on your farm?
Absolutely. And I will mention also that we entered the Finger Lakes International Wine Competition in New York this last summer, and we received a bronze medal. First wine competition that we'd ever gone to. We got a bronze medal on our Trominette, Kansas wine.
Good. These other fruits you mentioned, the tomatoes, the blackberries, apples, pears, does all that come off of your farm, or you bring some of that product in from outside
We have
to blend?
170 fruit trees on our farm, and we're a young winery, okay? And so our whole goal is to work with our neighbors as much as we can. And if we don't have, the apples available, then we have a neighbor that is really close, and we're working with them to obtain apples until we have our own.
Okay. So there's a little bit of product that you get.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, neighbor got to help out neighbor whenever possible. And it's a good deal for them. It's a good deal for us. We're using 100% Kansas product. We're not bringing any juice in from outside the state. We're not bringing any grapes in from outside the state. We're 100% Kansas, and that's the way we want to stay.
Okay. Is there anything else you sell there in the tasting room apart from wine? food example? Do you have menu options?
We do have a food establishment license from the Kansas Department of Agriculture. We have a full-fledged, I guess if you want to say, food establishment license. We have only used it maybe a handful of times. I mean, we served food for 140 people at one of our weddings, along with the wine. We did charge for the food, but I mean, that's within our realms to be able to do that. And we're fully licensed to be able to do that.
Okay, so you do offer food, but it's not like a daily thing. It's not like a restaurant where people come and buy.
It is absolutely not. No. Matter of fact, with the Kansas Department of Agriculture, in some ways, I question whether we even need a license, because you can do up to 5 or 6 different events a year without even having a license with the Kansas Department of Agriculture.
Okay, so that portion of your business, very limited as far as the food sales.
It is, yes, absolutely.
It's not part of the ongoing daily operations of your winery.
98% of all of our sales at the winery are wine.
Okay. And these fruits that you get from outside, they're blending with your wines, or are they made into their own wine? They're completely, I mean, you process them, but
We make apple wine, we make blackberry wine, we make tomato wine, we make I don't know how many different types of grape wine. I mean, they're all stand on their own.
okay. So if you get apples from the neighbor and produce wine, it's just from the apples from the neighbor. I guess my question.
That's correct.
Okay. Regard to the exhibit that you obtained, provided the directive 19-038 from the Division of Property.
Yeah,
Value.
David Harper signed that in April of 2019.
All right. Reading I have a question here. The page 2 of 2. If real property is used for more than one purpose, it may have more than one classification. If specific portions of the real property cannot be identified as being used for specific purposes, then the real property should be classified based upon its predominant use. Is the section of the property of your building that's been designated for commercial?
And I disagree with that.
I agree. I understand you disagree with classification, but is that not a separate identifiable section of the building?
The building's under one roof. It's 40 foot wide and 80 foot long.
And is that portion that's covering the tasting room, is that not a square footage? Is that not a specific defined area within the building?
There's a wall that separates that tasting area from the fermentation room.
Okay,
But I mean, other than that, it's all housed under the same roof with the same air conditioning, with the same water, with the same bathrooms and everything.
same as your house, your residential.
Excuse me,
Your residential portion is also under that.
it's separated by a wall.
Right. But it's a different classification.
But you have, the county has the residential area as residential.
Okay. I don't have any other questions. Mr. Irvine, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Terrell, any redirect?
A clarification question by Mike. So, Mr. Irvin, you were asked if there were other counties that had commercial classifications on-farm wineries, and I want to expand on the Johnson County. In the past, prior tax years, the county had taken a position that some of it was commercial and some of it would be agricultural, correct?
On one particular one, for sure, yes.
And the Casey Wineco people have appealed, and they have now received assurances from the county that their property is 100% agricultural.
That is my understanding.
Okay,
Yes,
and that they have a memorandum from their county counselor that on-farm wineries are to be classified and valued as agricultural.
that is my understanding.
And that will be the way it goes from 2023 forward, since they have changed their opinion after having viewed the Casey Wine Co. property.
Again, I can't speak for the county, but that was my understanding from what I heard. Yes.
Okay, and were there any other, well, never mind, I'm done. That's all I had. Thank you.
Mr. Mars, any further cross?
No.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Irvin.
Yes.
You can step down. Thank
Did you have any questions?
Oh, I thank you for reminding me. I should
Yes.
ask. Do any members of the board have questions for Mr. Irvin?
Actually, I had one, but I didn't get the square footage of the whole building, but it was just
The-
given in the cross, so.
I can give that to you. The square foot of the entire building is 40 by 80, and which would be 3,200 square feet, not including the basement.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
You can have a seat. Thank you. Ms. Terrell, would you like to call your next witness?
Yes. So could, scheduling wise,
Mhm.
I think we can get through this, but I just want to make sure no one's going to pass out from hunger or.
I think we're okay.
I'll
If
survive.
anybody out there needs a break at some point, holler at me and we can take a break.
This, the next witness.
Can I just,
Yes.
as I was writing that, so the building is 40 by 80. Is it a full basement?
No.
How big is the basement?
The wine cellar, as we call it, is basically 20 foot by 30 foot. And
Okay.
it's underneath the tasting room.
Okay,
All
thank
right.
you.
Yes.
Brian, you're next. I have less questions for you.
It's good.
But an equally large exhibit. All right, if you would state your name and then spell your last name as it's being recorded.
First name is Brian, last name Zesiger, Zesiger.
Okay, and are you an owner of the property that's under appeal?
I am.
Okay, and before I inquire about the property, could you introduce the board to yourself and Gina's background and how you got into the on-farm winery business?
It's we like to say it's a love story, but a little bit before I get to there. I was born in Texas, went to the University of New Mexico, and then after swimming, I decided to join the Army. So I had a life and career in the United States Army from about 1994 until about 2.5 years ago. I first started out as an infantryman, then went on to OCS, then to flight school. I'm an Apache pilot. I then later went on to maintenance test pilot school back at Fort Rucker. I've been stationed all over the world. I've been deployed to Iraq, Afghanistan, Africa, Haiti, Korea. I've served in various capacities. I've been a commander. My last command, I had a command in both Fort Bliss and then also in Afghanistan of approximately 320 soldiers. My last stationing was at Fort Leavenworth as a MCTP mission command training program where we trained divisions, brigades all around the United States. My last deployment was with the United Nations. I was a senior advisor both in Haiti and then in Mali, Africa. Specifically, we worked with the indigenous population. We looked at sustainable ways that they could raise food and get rid of their waste, which gave me a unique insight both into Haiti, as there's been problems there, and then into Mali, Africa. That's a little bit about me. My wife is the brains of the operation. Gina Montalbano has a PhD in education and could write circles around me. I'm the knuckle dragger. She is the brains behind the operation. And I met her while I was stationed at Fort Leavenworth. We say we're chapter twos. We were both married once before. We met each other and we decided that we needed to figure out something to do together. We never figured it would end up where we are today, not even here, but even making wine. So we decided whether we are going to be professional alcoholics or we are going to be professional winemakers. Gina's background, she's a first generation Sicilian. I can't say Italian or my mother and father-in-law would berate me. So her parents are immigrants and her family still in Italy produces wine in Sicily. So we decided to start making wine. We found that we were good at it. It was the first time I had ever experienced doing something that wasn't dress right dress, that wasn't to follow the rules. And I was given some freedom. It found that Gina and I were good at it. We made our wine in our basement, and then later, as the business and our passion grew, we continued to grow it to what it is today.
Okay, and Gina's background is also in education?
Hers is, yes,
Okay, and were you present in the room today to hear all the testimony so far?
I was.
Okay, and with respect to Mr. Irvine's testimony, are you in agreement with his testimony about the comparable properties that you both looked at for classification?
Yes, Ed, Cindy, Gina, we spent probably the last 6 months going over all this information in depth, looking at everything. Then also what Ed didn't talk about is we also belong to a association of grape growers and winemakers where also Julie and Kirk are involved in. They're the owners of Casey Wine Company and many of the other wineries that we're talking about, along with Senator Tom Holland. So we know the ins and outs. We've been briefed on, and we're assisted by all those other farm wineries.
Okay, and from an agricultural colloquialism, your farms are spitting distance apart, are they not?
Yes, ma'am. We're 2 minutes. Maybe it takes longer to drive it than walk it, but yes, ma'am. The only thing that separates Ed and I is I-70. So we go over a bridge and we're right. We can almost see each other's vineyards.
So when Mr. Irvine talks about neighbor helping neighbor, your two wineries work together in a lot of like research for this and trying to get your property classified as.
Yeah, this has brought us ever more together. Not only have we worked on this, but I've gone to Ed for help. He's lent me yeast. I've borrowed a pump over pump. We go back and forth. So whatever we need, we share in ideas and winemaking and do other wineries. And I think that's common practice with farming. I'm not of a farming background, but as I get introduced to other farmers, hey, I broke my tractor. Hey, can you come help me with a spade? It's a phenomenal community that I belong to, a community that very few people understand, but to be able to say I have a home and have a community that I can rely on, it's very unique, and I love the opportunity.
Okay, and if you, I think we included in your exhibit virtually the same comparables that Mr. Irvine did, so we won't go over those again. But this is all something that two of your two families have worked on to put together for the board. Am I right?
Absolutely.
Okay, and you're familiar with the on-farm winery, I guess, from Casey Wine Co.
Yes, we got familiar with Julie and Kirk, found us after you go blind into some of this. And so they started coaching and helping us. And this has gone back and forth.
And they had a similar issue in their county, which is Johnson County, as what you're facing today, correct?
Very, very similar. Yes, ma'am.
And their issue is now resolved in favor of classifying the property, their on-farm winery, as agricultural property.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And the packet of information that you have had, I'm sorry, let me rephrase this. We distributed, just for demonstration purposes, the pictures.
I have them.
You have them? Okay. And Mr. Jones, did you distribute those? These are not, Mr. Jones? Did- Okay, thank you. That's it. Just if you would describe what the pictures are of so that the board can kind of get a connection to the exhibit and the property record cards and what it looks like.
Sure. So that first is some of our brand new grapevines that we had planted, I believe this year. Those are grow tubes on there that allows you to make sure they go vertical.
Okay,
The next picture is our new puppy Comanche with some of our older grapevines. Then you will also see Gina and I, again, didn't have much coaching going forward into this realm. So I'm probably the only winemaker in the state of Kansas or anywhere that has approximately 350 glass carboys. And that's how we started doing all of our wines. And I didn't understand scaling. So we started with that and very quickly had to move on to other practices, which we'll get to.
okay. And then-
The next one is some of our other vines. And if you were to zoom in on it, they're actually brand new grapes on there and what they look like. It's just a small cluster and what they look like as they go along. The next picture there is in our tasting room in Vino 1. That's the building that we're currently talking about, Vino 1. Vino 1 is a building that I built with a couple other buddies. It's not approximately, it's 30 feet wide and approximately 62 feet long. And that is a bunch of ladies. I wish I could tell you who it is, but enjoying glasses of wine or some beverage that we have produced. The next picture below that is right below their feet. I designed this building. And so the cellar below it is where we produce all the wine. Now you can see that we've graduated from those glass carboys. They're in the far left side. There's a 250-gallon tote. There's 55-gallon plastic drums. And then in the back, there's 250-gallon stainless steel. And then in the far back, we had just started our barreling program. And then in the foreground there is us bottling wine. That's what a bottler looks like. We are all handcrafted. So it's all done by hand.
Okay,
So moving right along so that this is a trailer, and these are what it looks like during picking. And each box there weighs approximately anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 pounds. And that's what we put the grapes into. So we were talking about events. This is one of the first events that we came up with since I mentioned I went to the University of New Mexico. The board may be familiar with Albuquerque and the Balloon Fiesta. Had an impact on me. I thought, what a great thing to bring something from our past. And you'll also see that we have 2 military labels there. So what Gina and I rely on in doing everything is this is a piece of us. This is who we are. I don't know anything except for military. Most of my adult life has been spent in the military. So our blackberry wine is called Black Hawk Blackberry. There's a funny joke to this. So I was an Apache pilot, Black Hawk pilots. I have many that are friends. It's one of our sweetest wines. And we say that, Black Hawk pilots are sweeter than true gun pilots. So it's a jab at those Black Hawk pilots. The other wine there is a mixed fruit wine. It tastes like a sangria and it's called Household 6. It's a call sign that you would refer to your spouse. And then in the very back, you will see that we have balloons, and we have twice a year Twisted Flying, and it continues to grow. And it's something that everybody really enjoys and we enjoy. And it's a way to highlight, like we are in this picture, our wine. Then you have something that's recent that we have just started doing is, for some reason, people like to jump on grapes and they've all watched Lucille Ball and said, I want to stomp grapes. And they always ask like, what are you going to do with all this grape juice?
Yeah.
I actually throw it all away.
Uh-huh.
No, that does not go into my wine. And I kid, I say, if you want wine that tastes like feet, go buy Barefoot at Walmart. So we don't use that wine with us. The next picture is actually in Big Vino, our new building that we've just recently, and this is crushing. This was our first crushing that we ever did in this building. And these are, there's 3 volunteers and then Patrick, who's our assistant winemaker. And you're getting a little picture of how we do crushing, but we'll go through. The next picture is in Vino 1. That's a better picture. At the bottom of that picture, below the oak barrels, is our filter press. It's how you filter the wine, or how we filter the wine. There's us coming through Vino 1 in the next picture, coming through the barn doors. This is getting ready to crush about 10 tons of grapes. This is me doing a punch down on grapes. This is from this year this is done twice a day. And people just don't know how red wine is made and what it takes to do a punch down and a pump over and how red wine is made. Okay, so this picture is this is my wife's favorite picture. It is my bane of existence. It is the most difficult wine that I produce. We do not grow these cantaloupes. Though I have attempted. This is from a friend of ours, Knoll Farms. Brad grows these for us. This is extremely labor intensive. We do this inside now, thank God. So you first have to cut the skins off. You have to de-seed it. Then you have to put it through a blender. Then you have to press it. Then you put the juice into fermentation. And then after that, you have to clean it all up. It is the most difficult wine. I hate it. And my wife makes me make it because we've been sold out of it for about a year. The next is a picture of our Hardly Twisted cider. Again, all I know is military. I'm not, it's just what I know. So our first wine is a Amaretto apple. So we call it AA. I served in the 82nd Airborne, which is all-American Airborne. All the military knows it is 82nd, and that's the little AA there. There's a blacked out coffee wine on tap there. Yes, we make coffee and wine together, and we put it on tap. This is an interesting picture because this is another veteran farmer that is actually in the packet, the Oregon Trail, and he brings his bees over. What I'm trying to do here is, if he'll raise his bees here, maybe he'll give me a cut, and we're going to start to try to introduce some of that wine into the flavoring or the back sweetening of our wine. So his hives, and we've also got another person now putting their hives out on our vineyard. This is a picture of our barreling program. You may or may not be able to tell that the barrels are wet. Ed talked about barrels that dry out, and there's a whole process of getting them reconditioned so that you can use them for wine. So there's a picture of Big Vino. We built this primarily so that we could do all the crushing inside. There's approximately each one of those totes, and my math may not be a little bit off, so 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, about 1,400 pounds in grapes. And we do all the crushing in Big Vino. That's why it was built there. So that is, and you're going to get to see some other pictures. This is a picture of Vino 1. This was the tasting room that most of us will refer to. This is the building that I built. We're actually having a farm to table dinner here, and we've paired that with 5 to 6 other wines that we produce. This is us crushing in Big Vino. This is my wife taking my picture, and us and the boys putting all the grapes through the crusher. It's a labor of love because this will take hours, and also have to think about normal harvest is sometime between August, September, and October. Well, when is our hottest time? So one of the problems we run into is spoilage if those grapes get too hot. So we've brought it all inside, gets it out of the elements and gets it out of the bugs. This is another picture below Vino 1. It's where also we store the wine. We've now, Big Vino is where we produce all the wine. And then for purposes of aging and for storage, we bring all the wine produced into Vino 1 and we store it in that cellar. Most people don't understand that wine usually is made at least a year prior to whatever you're drinking. So this vintage that we just harvested in 2022 will most likely not even hit the shelves until 2023, or we'll hold it back and let it age either in barrels or in the bottle for years to come. And there's an overhead picture. That is Big Vino. That's currently located on the property. That's where we are making wine, tasting the wine, and processing everything. The next picture is we produce over 45 different federally approved labels. Again, we are not the norm. We do some very different wines. We have a tomato jalapeno. We have a Hellfire wine, which is a jalapeno red. My wife said nobody would ever buy it. And I like to put that in the testimony that it's our #2 seller, is our Hellfire wine. And the reason it's called that is I was an Apache pilot and the Apache shoots the Hellfire missile. Some interesting pictures here. This is the way you weigh your grapes is we'll take it on the trailer and we'll weigh the truck and trailer, and that's just one of our weight tickets. Just some people enjoying wine and hard cider and Big Vino. And we recently were featured on 5 o'clock flights, or no, Channel 5 flights. So that's a newscaster. It was kind of fun to have them come in and highlight Farm Winery and get to do a punch down, tour the vineyard, see what we're all about, and then see us on TV. We'll get probably into some of this, but so I love pumpkin. What can I say? I'm a pumpkin addict. And so I thought I'd try my hand at pumpkin spice hard cider. It's done well, and really, really well, because we're on our last keg of that. And that's a small picture of our growler and the pretzels that we sell with that. In case we don't get to it, we received a grant from the USDA for our hard ciders and to get that moving along. This is a terrible picture of my backside. I was hanging a picture when I served in the 82nd Airborne. I jumped out of C-17s. That's a picture of C-17 with a lowering line around it. Here's another great picture, probably this summer where we're still getting rain, of our grapevines, or one of the rows of grapevines. Currently on our vineyard, we have producing 15 acres. This year I put in 5,500 vines. We drill all those with, or I drill all those with our skid steer. And then you'll see on that last picture, these are baby vines that we had put in this year. Hopefully they'll stay and they'll grow. We do not do any irrigation per se. I don't have piping for irrigation, but we did register our pond with the state of Kansas so I can utilize that for irrigation, even though we're about 10 feet below what normally is. And then there's a pavilion. So the
Is
board-
this the pavilion that the county appraiser testified that he had valued and classified as commercial?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I believe so. That pavilion looks at our pond that we've utilized. I'm sure nobody remembers COVID, but we had built this building and then everybody wanted to be outside. I believe we received a grant no, we didn't get any grant money for this. So, or maybe some COVID money, but yeah, this was a weekend project that me and a buddy built the pavilion. It's a way for people to go outside, drink the wine, and not be in close contact with people.
Okay. And at some point in time, were you notified that the pond was even classified as commercial?
I about fell over when we were told that you're charging, we heard that actually, is it okay if I refer back to so when we met with the county, so part of my background is military. I've been trained to understand what's going to happen when you go in and do testimony. So we recorded the conversation. It was shocking to us. And if I can find that here in the back, where we started talking and we asked Bob, we asked Bob how even if we don't come up, if I don't see it right here, and I may not have it tagged properly, how did he figure out, how did the county, not Bob, but how did the county decide that a privately owned pond that is not stocked by the state? Because I called the state Fish and Game and I said, hey, listen, is this commercial? And the first response I got, he laughed at me. I was like, well, no, this is a serious question. And he knew I was serious. And I explained the situation and he said, no. He said, unless the state stocked the pond, he said, that is a private entity, you can do with it. And he then went on to say, to give me an example of a court case, and I think you and I talked about this court case because you actually knew about it, was a court case involving a lease, a hunting lease, where the county said that it was commercial hunting. But then what the court did is refer to the subject matter experts, which is the Kansas Department of Agriculture. And they said, nope, they're fenced in livestock and they hunt them. It's agriculture. The guy gave me that idea and said, hey, listen, it's agriculture. This is agritourism. Like there's no jurisdiction and it's not commercial. I said, okay, all right. So that was the portion. So when we met Bob, unbeknownst to us later, he changed the taxation of the property and took away some of that. Now, we're still confused on that.
At some point in time, he had a larger acreage as commercial
Correct.
and then somehow that became a smaller acreage for.
Correct.
Okay. And to date, you don't know how that happened. Could be any reason. We don't know.
Well,
I want to look at, because I know we included in your exhibit the entire Kansas growing agritourism in Kansas. The manual that was produced. And like, let's just look at what that is marked as their page 3 of chapter 1. They say it's okay to charge people to come out to your farm and tour, correct?
absolutely. This is the roadmap for agritourism in the state of Kansas.
And it says that many farmers and ranchers find it difficult to believe that somebody will pay just to experience what happens in your everyday life. That's what agritourism is about, is it not?
Okay.
And the hope is that farmers will be able to be sustainable from an income perspective on their own farm without having to work a second job, correct?
I think this is really a roadmap to farmers diversifying their properties, much like a financial person would say, don't put your money all in one area. You got to be diversified.
And in fact, when they talk about the roadmap, they say, hey, if you have a barn, a pavilion, a machine shop, or an empty farmhouse, you can make it a wedding venue, a store, a gift shop, a retail space, fruit and vegetable stand, food concession area, eating area with tables, and conduct group activities like craft making, gardening classes, tours, and bed and breakfast, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, so that literally is a roadmap. If you want to become involved in agritourism, this is what the manual that says how to do it.
They also say here, people will pay to hunt. Well, is hunting, fishing not the same thing? I'm surprised that the state of Kansas hasn't read their own manuals.
The chapter 7, again, is specifically on wineries, vineyards as destinations, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And does it not tell you on page 38 of chapter 7, how you market your wine?
It not only tells you that, but the state of Kansas has given us grants to do marketing, to wrap our minivan, to help us advertise, and to help us do what's written in the manual.
Right. It says you got to have a website, right? It tells you don't scrimp on that, get a website. They tell you can have tastings, correct?
Yes.
Then it says what we all know to be true, wine lovers or food lovers too, right? And it suggests that you have special dining events around culinary themes that go with your wine in order to market the wine, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. It talks about, hey, you can have festivals and special events, and they encourage you to do that, correct?
And we do all those.
And it says that you can, not only does it tell you that you can have a wedding event to market your wine, it even has a contract in form for you to say, okay, I'll just take this page out of here and this is my wedding contract form.
If the board will turn to the very back of, I think we printed some of them, the very back of your binder for agritourism, it has a
sample,
contract. Yeah.
sample wedding
example.
contract.
So it's not specific to farm wineries. It's just to any agritourism business.
Right. And we have bed and breakfasts that are on the rural areas and they sometimes do weddings. And this is a sample wedding contract that the state says you can use as if you're part of the agritourism, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Can you describe your experience with how various governmental entities treat on-farm wineries? In other words, is the county appraiser the only kind of lone ranger out there saying this is commercial while the state and the feds say agricultural?
Well, so it goes back to Casey Wine Company, who coached us and who, it starts with an email they gave to us back from 2014 from Nick Jordan from Kansas Department of Revenue, I
He
believe.
was the Secretary of Revenue.
Sorry, Secretary of Revenue.
He's the big boy.
Sorry. Let me put these glasses on. And I'll summarize from here. And it just says, Mr. Chairman and County Manager. And they basically point out that Casey Wine Company in Johnson County is agriculture, but it says Attorney General's opinion number 9292 by Robert Steffen, which after reviewing case laws using this sample, we conclude that a farm winery is an agricultural purpose and is therefore exempt from county zoning regulations pursuant to KSA 1991, supplemental 192921. But that was the start of Casey Wine Company helping us, giving us the memorandum from David Harper back in 2013, and then later getting us the directive 19-038. And it's one of the, and I had to be schooled on this by you, what a directive is. But when the county thought they had heard maybe through I don't know, the Facebook that maybe we were charging something. The directive says, and this is only in 2019. However, if the county appraiser is aware that a property may have more than one use that could affect classification, it would be prudent to contact the owner for more information. So in the Army, if higher headquarters tells me, hey, it's prudent, you should probably do this. If you're not going to do it, my boss would put his foot right in my behind.
So it appears, at least from the cross-examination, that the county is relying on the taxpayers to explain what uses of the property. They make no effort to do that on their own.
What's even worse is when we went to go talk to Bob and Travis, and we said, hey, look, we'd like to be like Jet Produce or like Next to Nature. Lo and behold, after our meeting, they switched them to commercial. And so we had invited Next to Nature here because he's flabbergasted. Now, these landowners are now going to have to go back and defend that they're agriculture because we want to be like them. That's either incompetence or targeting. And
You
it's
feel like the difference between how you were treated versus, let's say, Mr. Hoagland, is he sells cattle and you sell alcohol, wine.
Yeah, I just think that it's either alcohol or maybe they just don't like military retiring in Leavenworth and starting a business. I don't really get it.
But did you, in your research, did you find where they targeted any other kind of agriculture for commercial treatment other than wine?
No.
So the common denominator appears to be wine.
Yeah, it's fermentation of a grape that. And you're having somebody's coming to buy something at your place. Well, doesn't every farmer sell to somebody coming to their place? Because if they're not selling it from their farm, then they're the manufacturer and they're shipping it through a supplier and then it's getting sold at Walmart. So
Farming is a business.
Absolutely.
And we expect them, but you heard the county appraiser testify that he thought those people that had eggs for sale, that was intermittent and they didn't have a place dedicated to eggs, but somehow he sees it for wine is the distinguishing factor that you sell wine versus eggs.
I think what you're saying is tomato. We're all agriculture and we got 146 pages of a roadmap of whether you're a winery, an alpaca, honey, cattle, we're all agriculture. And through all the stuff that we've read, it blows me away. Like Ed and I were like reading, let's just recently, because we talked about Casey Wine Company and, we've gone over a 1992 opinion from a county or a attorney general. That's kind of a long time ago. Maybe they didn't get it. So then what we need to do is look at another, if I can find it. I did mark everything so that I could find
Well, let me
this.
ask you this. So from your research, you know that the federal government through the USDA considers on-farm wineries, including this production, sale of wine and wine accessories, agriculture, correct?
Absolutely. To the extent that we've received a large grant from the USDA for our hard ciders.
And we know that the Department of Agriculture for the state of Kansas considers on-farm wineries who produce and sell wine and wine accessories are agriculture, right?
Yes.
We know the Attorney General, Bob Steffen, said it's agriculture, correct?
Yes.
We know that the then Secretary of Revenue, Nick Jordan, said it's agriculture.
Yes,
We know the courts have said in a zoning case, it's agriculture.
yes, ma'am.
We know the Leavenworth County zoning regulations say it's agriculture.
It does, but
The Lone Ranger appears to be the county appraiser who says, I think it looks like they are competing with the local business and therefore they're commercial.
so that's like comparing a cattleman to Walmart and saying, well, Walmart sells beef and you sell beef, so you're the same. So we didn't just want to go hang our hat on Department of Agriculture. We then went to the subject matter experts in the state of Kansas and a lot of in the United States. We called our local Kansas Farm Bureau. Can I read that letter that they sent to us
Yes.
in support of this? So it says, agricultural nature of farm winery businesses. Dear Zessigers, the Kansas Farm Bureau Legal Foundation is dedicated to providing education, information, and research that will support and continue well-being of all persons directly, indirectly, or directly engaged in agriculture or related enterprises. We advocate for the members of the Kansas Farm Bureau, the largest general farm organization in the state, with over 100,000 members and located in all 105 counties in Kansas. We are happy to write this letter clarifying the agriculture nature of your wine business and the many others like it located around the state. Grapes and wine are recognized as agricultural products under state and federal law. Now, they've also got that marked at the bottom of the page so you can go and see how they reference it. It would naturally flow then that a building located on agricultural land where the agricultural products are grown and which is used for storage, production, marketing, and said agricultural products is an agricultural building and should be classified and taxed as such. Essentially, what they just said there was enology, which is the making of the wine, the storing of the wine, the selling of wine, the tasting of wine, is all agriculture. But they further go on. Other areas of Kansas law provide support for classification farm winery activities and buildings as agriculture. Farm wineries are defined under Kansas Liquor Control Act as wineries licensed to manufacture, store, and sell domestic table wine and domestic fortified wine. The Kansas Liquor Control Act specifically excludes farm wineries farm wineries from the definition of manufacture. So this is a statute, and this is the handbook that we follow. It has been concluded that the operation of a farm winery constitutes an agricultural purpose and is therefore exempt from county zoning regulations, and that the county cannot use special event codes to regulate activities at a farm winery, including events in its building, because they fall under the agriculture use exemption from zoning regulations. Kansas has included buildings and other structures as part of the definition of agricultural land for purposes of Kansas recreational use statute, which they're referring to as the 2004 statute, I believe. Finally, Twisted Vines is a registered agritourism operation with the state of Kansas. It is the purpose of the Agritourism Promotion Act to promote rural tourism and rural economic development by encouraging owners to operate or operations of farms, ranches, and rural activities, including historical, cultural, and natural activities, to invite members of the public to view, observe, and participate in such operations and activities for recreational or entertainment purposes. The act further says in its stated purpose that it shall be liberally construed to Somebody's gonna have to help me. I always mess this word up. And it's a difficult word. But you can read it and then you can surmise.
Tell me, yeah.
Yeah,
And then I can say, I have no
yeah,
idea what you're
sorry.
talking about.
the
Oh, effectuate.
effectuate, sorry, that's a hard word for me to say. Effectuate that purpose. While the scope of the act is limited liability for agritourism operation, the purpose showcases the legislation's intent in promoting agriculture and a landowner's ability to share agriculture with the public through agritourism activities.
So this, Kansas is in the first place. We have other wineries that are located in a similar area that draw tourism. Let's say Napa Valley, for instance. People go there, correct? To taste wine and buy wine.
Yeah, all the time.
And they stay there and spend money and it's good for that area. There's one in Herman, Missouri, is there not?
Yeah, everybody's heard of Herman, Missouri. Nobody's heard of Kansas wineries, but yes,
Leavenworth, Kansas. Yeah.
yes.
So it would have a economic benefit to promote agritourism and specifically on farm wineries for the state of Kansas.
Huge. I mean, Ed talked about it. We belong to this other organization called Harvest Host. So we get RVs that come directly off of I-70 and come stay out at our vineyard. All they do is dry camp. They come in, they need a place to stay the night. They don't want to stay at Walmart parking lot. They stay with us. We charge them nothing, but all we ask is that they buy some of our products. Wow, this is diversification. It's not in the handbook, but it was something that we actually found during COVID to keep us selling wine.
And, okay, I've been there. You also sell wine-related products, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
You make a soap.
Yeah, so we have another LLC that's called Bella Vina, which means beautiful wine. So what we discovered was we were throwing away a lot of waste. There's sediment in wine that you can't utilize for the winemaking. And my daughter at 14 decided that she wanted a soap scrub, and we were doing fermentation of coffee wine, and we're cheap. And we said, maybe we could use the fermented coffee grounds with some olive oil and salt and make a scrub. That was the start of Bella Vino. We now make jellies, we make soaps, we make scrubs, and they are all byproducts and trying to show sustainability of our winery.
To use the entire product.
Absolutely.
So, okay, so those would all be considered wine-related products, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So in your opinion, based on your actual ownership and involvement with each activity at your farm, is your farm devoted to agricultural purposes?
I'm insulted by the question. I really,
Rarely.
yeah. So rarely do you get told by your client that you're insulted. Yeah, it's in.
I've told you that my dad was in the military, so
Yeah.
I'm used to this. Go ahead.
Yeah. So our little farmhouse, which we live on the property, there's approximately 100 acres, 89.7, I think to be exact. Yes, we have a residence there, but everything on that property is totally and 100% devoted to growing grapes, making wine, selling wine. This is what happens when a retired military guy just goes out of control and his wife says, sure, I'll back you up.
It's wine.
Yeah, it's wine. It's fun. I did find that other Attorney General's opinion. Can I just read Derek
Which one is that?
Schmitz?
Derek Schmitz?
Yep, because that was one of the ones that Casey Wine Company had given us. It was written June 9th, 2016. So, when you start quoting older stuff, and we talked about fairing, and I didn't know what fairing is when I was reading statute. Here's a more relative one, and this is a Attorney General opinion. And it says synopsis. I'll just go the synopsis. A county may not apply zoning regulations to a beef cattle feed yard or dairy or to any structure on that property used for such purposes, such as a feed mill, scale house, office, or a mechanic's shop, machine shop. A county may not require buildings used solely for agricultural purposes to comply with construction codes adopted by the county government. A county may not require a person desiring to construct an agricultural building to receive a prior, or may ask for a prior determination that a building is exempt from county zoning regulations and building codes. And then they cite a whole bunch of stuff. It just goes to the perpetuation of attorney generals and other courts and case law and everything else. Yes, we're agriculture. You may not like alcohol, but guess what? We're in it to win it, and we're agriculture.
Okay. I think that's all I have from Mr. Zuck.
All right, Mr. Mars, cross-examination.
Afternoon. Spoke a lot about, and we had a lot of pictures about the I would call it Quonset Hut building, I guess, called it Big Vino.
Yes, sir.
Okay. That property was under construction. Is that correct? You completed it this year, began using it this year. Is that,
That's correct.
so it's not part of this appeal, actually?
That's correct.
Okay.
But since he talked about it earlier, I thought we'd just go ahead and talk about it since Bob brought it up. And then we were also brought it up in our first meeting with Bob. He had already talked about it and called it an event center, which there's nothing on our property that's an event center.
Okay. But it's not part of the commercial valuation that.
Not yet,
Right.
but I just think we should solve all our problems today so we don't have to drag everybody back in here.
I'm just trying to clarify the property that's at issue.
Absolutely.
Today.
Sure.
So, you also mentioned about the pavilion down by the pond, and that had been in commercial apparently initially. And you filed an informal appeal and met with Bob and Travis,
Sure.
county appraiser's office. This is your understanding as a result of that meeting and the information you provided there, that they took that pavilion and that portion of the ground around it out of commercial?
I have no idea what Bob did. I don't know how he got to that.
Do you?
I don't really understand what he changed with that. So I can say that things have changed, but I have no idea. When we talked with Bob and we asked him, well, how did you determine this? There was no way to tell us how he determined. But then we get another letter saying there's a different, and there's no way to figure out how are they reaching these conclusions.
Okay.
So
But,
there's been a change, yes.
and it was removed out of the commercial. It's not part of what's at issue here today, as far as the pavilion.
I think it is a part of the issue because I brought that testimony of what Bob and I talked about, and we're talking about hunting and fishing. It is an issue and we need to address it here.
Okay, but it's not classified as commercial today.
Today, it is not classified as commercial.
Okay. And you mentioned Jet Produce.
Sure
Are
did.
you familiar with that business?
A little.
Little. Jacob Thomas has a bunch of greenhouses. For a long time, apparently. I don't know how long they've had the greenhouses. Recently added a couple of small outbuildings to sell produce out of. Are you aware of that?
And no, I mean, we haven't been by there, but I am aware that when I talked to Jacob and we had brought him up in this, that he had recently received a letter from the county saying, hey, you're now commercial. And I said, Jacob, you got to fight this. Your agriculture, next to nature's agriculture, we're agriculture. You got to fight this. He said, well, Bob, He said, Bob told him, we're only going to charge you $1 a square foot. It's not that much. And Jacob said, look, I'm too busy right now to fight it. So
Okay.
that's what I know of that.
So for a small, basically like a pull-in garden shed, basically is what the building would amount to. It's treated as commercial. Or you don't know.
So what's your point?
2022. I guess my question, you said it was just added on. Are you aware it's added on for 2022? It wasn't on for 20.
All I'm aware of is I brought it up with Bob and are saying, hey, why aren't we ag like them? I called Jacob and Jacob said, I just got a letter saying, hey, they're making our building commercial. And I'm like, Jacob, because now I have to go back to these people and apologize because it's either inept or it's targeting of what we brought up in our own testimony that I recorded with Bob. I brought up Jet Farms.
When did you have that testimony with Bob? What was the date?
The date, it's not date stamped, so I don't know. 2022
or 2021?
2022, this year, about July.
So after the county was legally required to make determinations as to classification and valuation for 2022.
If you want to say that, it looks like what I talked about then went and got changed after our conversation.
Okay, that would be illegal.
You said it, not me.
You don't know the timing of when stuff gets posted to the website.
So here's what I know. We've got snapshots of what's on the website from GIS of certain stuff. And then after I have conversation with the county, then it gets changed over as commercial. Now, you said illegal. I did not.
Wow. I'm somewhat familiar with how things get posted and timing on the website. It's irrelevant for the purposes here. I'd like to focus in then on the property as it's taxed. The building, if you have page 24 of the county's exhibit 2.
Sure.
Building here next to the octagonal.
Yep, it's a circus tent that we put up. So next to that, that's our original tasting room and
Okay, I just want to make sure. And that's the building that the county
currently is
22.
saying it's commercial.
Okay,
Actually, Bob's told me that those buildings are agriculturally built buildings, but is used for commercial.
okay, for that particular one.
That's correct.
The others are agricultural buildings used for agricultural is how they're classified.
Actually, that one's used for agricultural. That's why we're
Well, I understand that's why we're here, but
sure.
it's currently classified by the county as just that one building.
Sure.
Okay. And that's where you have your tasting room.
That is correct. And also our storage and manufacturing.
Okay, so there's portions of that building that are used for tasting room. Is that a defined area that's just tasting room as opposed to storage and your manufacturing, similar to what Irvine's setup was?
Yes, but the enology is throughout the entire building. So whether you're tasting it upstairs or tasting it downstairs, enology is taking place throughout the entire building. So there's a first floor and a cellar.
Okay. The tasting room area is on the first floor.
That is correct.
What's the square foot area that's dedicated to the tasting room?
I would say, 40 by 60. So approximately 2,400 square feet.
Okay. And the remainder of the building is used for these other purposes that you've.
The other
Other activities.
2,400,
Yeah.
underneath that is,
And I think you testified about like the cantaloupes. You bring those, you buy those from somebody else, you make the wine, sell the wine there.
sure.
Is there any other Is there any other wine that you sell there that's not manufactured on?
Yes, absolutely. So there's some wines that are made from concentrate or juice. We make what's called Rosy Bottoms. It's a cranberry with a grapefruit finish. At times, we don't produce enough apples. We currently have somewhere in the neighborhood of 85 to 100 apple trees that don't produce enough that we currently get. I have a wine that's called Tropical Stealth, which is a mango jalapeno wine. Mangoes don't grow here, so that's a concentrate juice. Then we also have contracted growers here in Kansas that produce grapes for us that we bring in.
Okay. So you get raw material from a variety of sources in
Absolutely.
addition to what you grow.
Absolutely.
And manufacture it there on the farm, sell it through the tasting room, and do you have internet sales?
We do. We do.
The tasting room, does that have like regular hours of operation throughout the year?
It is. We're very similar to Ed. It's actually something that's required by the agritourism and your grants and getting signs through agritourism. You're required to be open at least 5 days a week so that you can qualify for the agritourism grants
Okay.
and signage. And I believe Ed's already got that signage, which was also a fight against Leavenworth County. They didn't want those signs up.
The tasting room, capacity of 50, outdoor pavilion, capacity 40. Do you rent this space out for any other reason? I mean, actually collect a rent for like the wedding parties or other events that?
So any sort of event that goes on is married up with our wine. But nobody can just rent it and say, I'm bringing in my own party and I don't have anything. No, it's all run through the vineyard.
Okay. So as far as renting it, I mean, what? is that-
As far as a what?
As far as renting it,
You can't just rent it and just have your own party out there and bring your Budweiser and pop a keg and all that. No.
but you do rent the facility out and sell wine. I mean, you rent it for an event or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And is that something that happens certain times of the year, throughout the year?
Throughout the year, as much as we possibly can do it.
Okay. And what is that same for this outdoor pavilion? You rent it out to? I mean, is it part of this? Is it just part of the facility or is it?
It's all part of the vineyard and it's all diversification of how we could sell our wine. If I could have a wedding out there, we've done a wedding out there. If I could do a ladies' night out, then we have a ladies' night out. We've brought the lady bosses out there that my wife's a part of, and we don't charge them for anything, but then they go ahead and buy our wine. We've used it for anything I could dream up that gets people out there to the vineyard to buy our wine
Okay.
and hard cider.
Are there other things besides like food? Do you sell food there? Do you have like menu or
We do.
is it catered? You produce it there? You cook it there?
So,
how's that work?
so we have well, first and foremost, we have a food license, but the food license, primarily, you have to have a food license to produce the jelly. So you have to have we have a class 2 food license so that we can manufacture and make our jelly and then sell it. If you don't have that food license, then you would be shut down by them. So second to that is, yes, we have to have a food license for meat, cheese, sandwiches, all that we provide 5 days a week.
Okay. And that's just available for anybody who comes in to your wine tasting room, sample wines, buy some wine.
No, you don't have to buy some wines because we're family friendly. So that was one of the things that we didn't want to be is we're not a bar. We don't want to make this only 21. So if a kid comes in there with his parents and they're having an adult beverage, then we want that kid to be able to buy. So no, it's not a requirement. It's a addition to our wine.
Okay. All right. I don't have any other questions for witness. Thank you.
Ms. Terrell, redirect.
Nothing, thank you.
All right.
Only closing.
Mr. Ziesiger, I think you can have your seat. Thank you for your service.
Yep.
All right. I want to be mindful that we have another hearing set at 2:30. So, but I also don't want to make anyone uncomfortable. Does anyone need a break before we do closing
I don't.
arguments?
I know I'm not the only person in the room, but I'm just
All right.
piping
I'm
in.
fine.
Not seeing any strenuous requests for that. So, Mr. Mars, do you have closing statement for the county?
One moment. That's not the basement. There's been a lot of testimony about how these activities are all treated as agriculture by everybody in the state except the county appraiser. County appraiser doesn't do his job based upon the zoning regulations. He doesn't make up things, on his own. He follows taxation laws, directives from PVD. The county, Leavenworth County, apparently other counties. Admittedly, there's a variance between the counties about how some of these wineries are treated. Some commercial, some ag. But under the directives that they had, and got specific defined areas of a building, and a PVD directive saying if there's mixed use and you have that specific area that's designated to another use, then it can get a different classification. I think it's what the county's been trying to follow. Based upon the information they had, it looked like activities going on were more of a retail or commercial type activity as far as the tasting room areas of these buildings. Based upon the testimony, it sounded like maybe Z&M was more so that way than the Irvine Winery, where they have the wedding people come in and they don't charge for that. They don't rent it out for that. Both of them bring in product from outside sources to produce the product, their wines, bring in food, hold regular hours of operation. I mean, there's a lot there that makes it look like a commercial type activity or retail type activity. Been very easy for the legislature sometime throughout the years that all this other legislation has been going on with wineries to clarify that, they're purely agriculture for winery, no matter how they go about marketing this wine on their farm. Could have easily done that. PVD could have put out a directive making that very clear. That's not the case today. Maybe that'll be a situation later, but based upon testimony from the vineyard owners about how they're using that specific portion of the property. Heard the appraiser's testimony about that's why he classified that area as commercial. And I think under the current case law, current guidelines, that is an admissible, an appropriate determination. Obviously, there's other appraisers around the state who perhaps faced with similar situations have determined that, well, no, we feel like it's all agriculture. So I don't disagree that there's some discrepancy there, and that brings the equal fair treatment into play perhaps. But again, the fact that other aspects of government regulation of these operations all treated as agriculture doesn't necessarily mean that for taxation purposes, everything that goes on there should be treated as agriculture. And when you're operating it on a daily basis throughout the year, selling product not only from the farm, but from other farms, other methods of getting product in there. There's strong indication that there's commercial activity or the equivalent of commercial activity taking place in that defined area of the property, which is all that's at issue for the commercial evaluation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mars. Ms. Terrell?
Thank you. To properly consider this case, statutory construction, prior case law are crucial to getting to the correct answer. One of the first premises of statutory construction is that these are taxing statutes, which means they're to be liberally construed in favor of the taxpayer. But it may even require us to shed a few assumptions that some of us may have. I'd like to start with Irvine's small claims experience. I understand that we stand here before you today in a de novo position and that no part of the small claims decision is binding on this case. But I fear that the fact that the Irvines lost at that level may somehow be persuasive, subconsciously or not. And so I want to address what happened there. First, the Irvines argument there was the same as it was here at this hearing. But Mr. Jones was our hearing and was the hearing, whatever we call him. And he instructed the parties that the burden of proof was on the Irvines. That turned out to be an incorrect statement of the law. In fairness to Mr. Jones, the hearing was in June of 2022, and I believe the ruling on the burden of proof was an accurate statement of the position of BOTA in all matters involving the appropriate classification of property for ad valorem tax purposes at that time. But in July, about a month after the informal hearing, the Kansas Court of Appeals ruled otherwise. In case number 122499, captioned Dodge City Cooperative Exchange versus the Board of Gray County Commissioners, the county argued the BOTA was correct in finding the burden fell on the taxpayer when the issue was classification. The Court of Appeals disagreed, finding that the county's position would have us ignore the plain language of the statute, which requires the appraiser to, quote, to demonstrate by a preponderance of the evidence, end quote, that the classification was correct. That's the citing to KSA 79-1609. The court went on to say this provision establishes a quantum of proof, preponderance of the evidence, and also designates who bears the burden of proof during the proceedings, which the court says is the county appraiser. In other words, the language evinces a legislative intent that the taxing authority must prove the correctness of its classification, and cited to the In-Rate Camp Timberlake decision 111273. And the court finally concluded the board thus erred when it placed the burden on the co-op and not on the county. So the fact that the burden of proof on this issue who has it is settled law. The burden should have been on the county at the informal, but it's definitely is here on the county at this level. So let's look at what the county offered at the small claims level and here. Nothing, absolutely nothing to support its conclusion that the property should be classified as commercial. Not a statute, not a court case, nothing, zero. The county's exhibit in this case is also silent on that issue. And please tell me that the burden of proof means something, that you cannot come up and try a case before the Board of Tax Appeals, offer nothing, and be found to have carried your burden of proof. If that's the case, then the burden means nothing. The second error at the small claims hearing was the statement by Mr. Jones that it didn't matter how the county treated other taxpayers. He said the hearing was just on the issue of the Irvine's property, and that is also not correct. Forgive me a short trip down the tax appeals version of memory lane, but Kansas tax appeal statutes were separate and distinct. Equalization appeals were filed in the spring. That's what we call the EQ appeals, and taxpayers were required to demonstrate that their property was not treated in a uniform and equal manner as comparable properties. The appeal focused solely on how the taxpayer was treated in comparison to others constitutionally equalized, and then you were to constitutionally equalize the properties. The second appeal type was a payment under protest. In that type of appeal, the issue was not equalization, but instead focused solely on how the property under appeal was valued. Now, the lines between those have blurred over time. And to demonstrate, I would point out that KSA 79-1409 is a statute that provides the State Board of Tax Appeals, that would be you, shall constitute a state board of equalization. And you shall equalize the valuation and assessment of property throughout the state, and shall have the power to equalize the assessment of all property in this state between persons, firms, or corporations of the same assessment district, between cities and townships of the same county, and between different counties of the state. The statute further provides that you are to meet in your office or such other place within any county as the board shall deem advisable to perform the work of equalization, and the board shall meet, the board may meet at any time on or after January 15th of each year as it may deem necessary, and shall meet from the 11th day of July or the next following business day if that date shall fall on a date other than a regular business day until the 25th of August. Now, I don't think since 1985 that the board has sat as a state board of equalization from the time period of July 11th through August 25th, but yet that statute sits there. And I don't think to demonstrate my point, the lines between what is an equalization appeal and what is a payment under protest have blurred to be just two different opportunities to get to the same end. However, I would say that even though those lines have blurred, the law really has not. And the United States Supreme Court has even addressed that issue. In 1989, in Allegheny Coal, which is 488 US 336, the issue was equalization. The taxpayer was not asserting its value was incorrect. It asserted it was not uniform and equal with comparable properties that arguably were valued too low. The government argued the taxpayer's value was correct, and its remedy was limited to arguing to raise the valuation of comparable properties. Now, we heard that at the small claims, and we've heard it here today, but the Supreme Court of the United States held otherwise. They said, well, while we agree with the import of the opinion of the Supreme Court of Appeals of West Virginia that the petitioners have no constitutional complaint simply because their property is assessed at a figure equal to 50% of the price it paid for it at a recent arm's length sale. But their complaint is a comparative one. While their property is assessed at 50% of what is roughly its current value, neighboring comparable properties, which had not been sold, were assessed at a minor fraction of that figure. The court said the Equal Protection Clause protects the individual from state action, which selects him out for discriminatory treatment by subjecting him to taxes not imposed on others of the same class. They cited to the Hillsborough versus Cromwell, 326 US 346. And they said that they have no doubt that the petitioners suffered from intentional systematic undervaluation by state officials, and viewed in isolation, the assessments for the petitioner's property may fully comply with West Virginia law, but the fairness of one's allocable share of the total property tax burden can only be meaningfully evaluated by comparison with the share of others similarly situated relative to their property holdings. While the county ignored the issue in their exhibit, my taxpayers brought equalization appeals. Both brought forth solid, comprehensive evidence that their respective properties were not treated uniformly and equally with other properties in Leavenworth County or with other similar properties within the state of Kansas. But they didn't stop there. They addressed the underlying issue of whether or not they should rightfully be classified and valued as agricultural property under Article 11, Section 1 of the Kansas Constitution. So another trip down memory lane, although I confess I wasn't alive for all of this. But prior to Prohibition, did you know that Kansas led the country in wine production? Most are familiar with what happened to the wine industry and the alcohol industry in Kansas, and that was Carrie Nation. Ms. Nation, in addition to being opposed to tight clothing and corsets, claimed she had a divine ordination to promote temperance by destroying bars. And while having been born in Kentucky, she began her hatchet-wielding temperance campaign in Medicine Lodge, Kansas. Ironically, she passed away in 1911 at the age of 64 in a hospital in Leavenworth, Kansas. The hospital was founded by a physician for the treatment of individuals with medical ailments caused by alcoholism. Many years have passed since Prohibition, but in 1985, the Kansas legislature passed the Farm Winery Act, and on-farm wineries began planting, cultivating, and harvesting grapes to produce wine in Kansas. It became a catalyst to saving many family farms. The legislature was clear that the activity of growing grapes and producing wine was agricultural. Statutes were amended. The county said, well, you would think they would have done something. Well, they did. They passed the agritourism statute, making it even clearer that they want to promote agriculture and they want to promote a variety of them in order to save the family farm. Now, there's case law on zoning in Johnson County that made it clear that wineries are agricultural. There can be no doubt that the federal government considers it agricultural. The USDA, in conjunction with the Kansas Department of Commerce and the Kansas Department of Agriculture, have created and oversee agritourism. They have a manual. The manual, well, we know this because we put the exhibit in there, but we also know it because Mr. Irvine works for the USDA in specialty farms. The state produced this manual instructing farmers on how to become a registered agritourism farm and how to make money doing it. The manual, it has the chapter on farm wineries. It directs them to have events to market their wines, to charge for tours, bless you, to sell wine-related accessories, to sell food that would be consumed by their guests while tasting the wines. It says have a tasting room. It says have a website, promote events like hay rides, pumpkin patches, etc. It says participation in agritourism is an opportunity to save the family farm, to achieve a work-life balance where it may be possible to run a farm without having a second job off of the farm. And it directs that the farmer will need to get a sales tax license, which ours do, and they will need to comply with federal and state tax laws relating to their employees, which they do. The county seems fixated that these taxpayers are selling their product at a farm, making their efforts commercial, not agricultural. But I would caution following this illogical path. I know many attorneys stand here before you, and I've done it, and claim if you do this, the sky will fall, or this would be the first step on a slippery slope. But in this case, it's true. And why do we know that? Because as these taxpayers proceeded with their arguments at the county level, as they sent them the comparables, what happened? The county started changing people's classifications. The slope is on. We're standing on it right now. There's a farmer behind me that's knows that his property is going to be changed to commercial. So not only are we on the slope, but it was the county that sprayed it down while we were standing on it. But if the test is to be that any farmer that sells their product at a farm is commercial, then to borrow a phrase, Katie, bar the door. A farmer that sells milk out of the dairy barn will have to be commercial. Every farm that have with a sign that says they have eggs for sale, commercial. Every farm that has a sign, hay for sale, commercial. We provided you with the copies of all of those. Now, what was the county's testimony? They don't know anything about it, but they said they basically just attempted to pretend that they knew the eggs were only sold occasionally, or, oh, it's hay. They grow it on their own farm. I'm sorry. The eggs business, the pictures that we provided, the hay pictures that we provided, all of those pictures, the J&N Ranch, those people are in agricultural endeavor 365 days a year, and they sell their product right from the farm. And yet they're being treated differently than wineries. And I look at the J&N Ranch owned by a man I was in the legislature when I worked there, former majority leader Joe Hoagland. They have 2 sales a year at that farm. They sell cattle and animal semen from award-winning black Herefords. Those sales bring in several $100,000 per sale. Commercial? No. County said agricultural. Current state senator Tom Holland, ranking member on the state tax committee, has an on-farm winery in Douglas County. Is he commercial? Nope. And does anyone think that he would, as a member of the tax committee, think that his property would be commercial? No. I mean, this is an individual who knows exactly what the tax committee was thinking when they passed this legislation. So farmers sell eggs, goats, milk, animal semen, cattle, hay, seed, chicken, sides of beef. In fact, I assume some of you may be like me and you buy directly from a farmer beef and pork. Virtually any agricultural product one can think of, they sell from the farm. They also have events at their farms like cattle auctions, even fundraisers. I went to one this summer on a farm for a political candidate. Does that make them somehow not agricultural? No. Now, I would say, I draw attention to the board to an older case that's 1985 that I had some involvement in because it happened after it was a decision issued after I was general counsel for this board. It was the Board of County Commissioners of Johnson County, 694 Pacific 2nd, 455. And the late Chief Justice K. McFarland authored the opinion. And in that particular case, there was an exemption for low-income elderly housing. And Johnson County, kind of like Leavenworth County in this case, they went out and decided that they didn't think everybody was low-income elderly there. So they got the financial records from the facility and determined that, hey, not everybody here is low income. And there was a couple people that weren't elderly in their mind. And so they just weren't going to give them the exemption. And the Chief Justice McFarland said, burrowing through the financial statements of elderly residents is neither required nor pertinent for eligibility. And why did she say that? Because she said there's a federal program that licenses this facility. And if the federal government doesn't have a problem with how they're running it, then we don't either. And we're not going to stand in the shoes and say, well, we think something different. She said clearly that if, in fact, they don't qualify, the issue then is between the federal government and as a licensing agency and them, not the Supreme Court. And the court did not want the county going out burrowing through people's financial records. And quite frankly, that is exactly what is happening in this case. They're going and saying, but you sell wine, you sell soap, you make popcorn. I mean, anyway, in any event, if Leavenworth County's novel theory, and I would argue that it is the county with the novel theory, not the taxpayers, then there is a lot of case, in fact, even Mr. Jones said at the hearing, there's a lot of case law that wineries are commercial, but I couldn't find any. There may be board decisions, and there may be that we know about the one that was before agritourism was passed, but I don't know of any afterwards. But there's certainly, I can't find a Court of Appeals decision or a Supreme Court decision that says anything other than farm wineries are agricultural. Now it was zoning, but okay. But if their novel theory is upheld, then here's my Katie bar or the slippery slope argument. Virtually every farm in Kansas will be a target, and they will be forced to come to BOTA to argue to be correctly classified as agricultural. BOTA will have to hear case after case of whether a farmer becomes a commercial entity if they let their children sell eggs for spending money, as Mr. Irvine did when he was a youth, or if they advertise to sell sides of beef directly to the consumers. BOTA will become nothing more than an agency trying to draw a line of how much is too much. And I would argue that's not your job. Should hay sales be different than wine? None of those people have been targeted, just the wineries. And so when you look at the Allegheny coal case, can you make any other conclusion other than these wineries were targeted for specific discriminatory treatment different than every other farmer that sells their product at their farm? Now, maybe they're going to go get the rest of them and you'll have an entire docket of Leavenworth County farm cases by the time 2023 rolls around. I don't know, but I do know this, that when another client of mine had a case in Johnson County, the case was resolved because the answer is obvious. The property is used for agricultural purposes. And again, I would stress that the Constitution provides for land devoted for agricultural purposes. When we have exemptions, the legislature has sometimes, not in every case, but in some cases say that they must be actually regularly and exclusively used for this purpose in order to be exempt. They didn't choose to say that. And the people of Kansas didn't vote for that when they amended the Constitution. It was just devoted to. And what did PVD say? PVD says, hey, if it's predominantly, then go with that. Except in Leavenworth County, who now is saying 10% of this part of this building is residential or whatever, and this part over here is commercial, and this is not. There's a case from Salina out of Saline County that had to do with exactly that kind of issue where there's one parcel, but there's varying uses. There might be an ice cream store, and then they had a dairy, and the court said, you can't just value these unrelated things and add them together and say that's what it would sell for. Does anybody really think that there's a mass appraisal model that says, here's a universe of properties that have sold that are 90% residential, 10% commercial or whatever? I mean, I'm going to get my percentages, but no, there is not. So the question is, what is the predominant use, in my opinion? And the predominant use is what the Kansas Department of Revenue said. And just to conclude, the testimony was that Mr. Kent, who's from the Department of Revenue, PVD, he said, this is all I have. And what did he have? He had a copy of the statute that just says these are the different assessment rates. That's not a directive. That's not a rule or a reg. That doesn't say anything to anybody. It just says, here's assessment rates. And the only directive that they've issued is one that says if they're mixed use, go with the predominant use. I stand by my original assertion that the Lone Ranger here is the county appraiser. And to support the Lone Ranger theory, they offered you nothing. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Mars, any rebuttal closing?
I would disagree with Ms. Terrell's interpretation of the PVD directive. And it clearly sets out if there's a specific area that is used for certain use, then mixed use classification is appropriate. If you don't have that situation, then you go with predominant use. Be conflating the two. And as for, the idea that slippery slope and you're going to be flooded with cases of Leavenworth County, maybe other counties, treating everybody that sells eggs as commercial. These are clearly distinct situations as far as portion of the property that's being used to market the product. I've not seen anybody selling eggs that has a tasting room where they sell other beverages and other products for consumption. That space is dedicated to that and open for business, year round. So, there are distinctions between the two, and the county, there's plenty of evidence presented by the taxpayers where the county has recognized that there's a difference. They don't treat certain farm sales situations as commercial activity. So I don't understand what the concern was there. Seems totally unfounded, but that's all I have.
All right. Thank you. Well, as you both are aware, we will take this under advisement and issue a summary decision within 14 days of today. Any party who's aggrieved by that summary decision can request a full and complete opinion from us 21 days after receipt of that summary decision. Any party who wishes to appeal a decision of this board may do so. Those rights of appeal are clearly set out in the summary decision. They are time sensitive. And so please review that carefully if appeal is something that you all wish to pursue. Thank you. We will be adjourned. Thank you all. So I hate to rush you out, but we do
I
have
know.
another hearing starting.
I was pretty happy to work